We are live.
All right, well, let's give it a moment and make sure that everyone's able to transition over. Usually takes about 30 seconds.
Yeah, people are still coming in, Melissa.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks like it's stopped growing. No, a little more.
Slowly.
Let's give another 20 seconds.
Yeah. And for members of the public, I noticed as a couple of folks were coming in, they had raised their hand. We do have the Q&A function open in Zoom. And so if you do have any questions, we have a staff member who can answer your questions through the Q&A function.
Okay, Melissa, so it looks like we can probably start. Should I announce the meeting?
Sure.
Okay, out of habit. Good morning. This is the March 26th, 2001 joint workshop of the California Fish and Game Commission and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on coyotes in the environment. I'm going to not be chairing this meeting, but I'm Eric Sklar. I'm the immediate past president of the Fish and Game Commission and chair of the Wildlife Committee. And I'm really happy to have everybody here today. Melissa Miller Hanson, our executive director, is really going to be leading and chairing the meeting, but I wanted to welcome everybody and just say that I am deeply grateful to the staff of the commission, the staff of the department, others who are presenting, and to all the public, now 136 or so people who are attending. This is an area of real concern for all of us. We want to find solutions that are both positive for and for the safety of all of us and our communities, and for the protection of wildlife, which is the mandate of the commission. So I welcome you all here and look forward. I'm going to be observing primarily and listening and hoping to hear a really great, robust discussion about these issues after some great presentations. I hand it over to Melissa Miller Hanson, our executive director, to conduct the meeting. Thank you, Melissa.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to hand it over now to Stafford Lair, who's the Deputy Director for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who's co-hosting this workshop.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Commissioner Sklar. This has been a long time in the making. We've heard for years at commission meetings and in other public forums, various concerns expressed regarding coyotes and the interaction with the public, whether it's in the complete urban environment or in the urban wildland interface. And this is an opportunity to try to get a lot of information out and discussed. We know this is a very emotional topic and it can be charged at times, and we would just ask everybody to actively participate. A lot of us are here to listen. There are no easy solutions as we begin this more in-depth journey to the conversation. It's been around for a while, we know, and we hope that this is an opportunity to start to frame up possible collaborative, solution-oriented problem solving so that we can all lean into dual principles, and that is the public, the safety of the public, the welfare of the public, but also the conservation of the state's great natural resources. So thank you very much for everybody that's in attendance here. We're honored to have you participate in this, and we look forward to a fruitful conversation over these workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, Stafford. I do want to highlight again for members of the public, if you do have questions, we have a Q&A function open and available, and we have staff who can answer your questions there. I believe Tina Marie and Laura have some questions, so hopefully they can connect with Rebecca, who is managing our Q&A today. I'll introduce the rest of staff in just a moment, but in case some of the questions are related to some of the technical aspects of the meeting, I want to say that you're participating in a Zoom webinar. But if you are participating in the webinar and also calling in by phone for your audio, please make sure that your phone and your Zoom webinar are linked. If you logged into Zoom first and used the call me option, the linkage happened automatically. If you did not, then on your phone, please press #912-8071# to connect your audio to the webinar. Please note that if you are joining by phone only and wish to speak to an agenda item, staff will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're having any technical difficulties with any portion of the workshop, please contact Randy Shoup, and his email is randy, R-A-N-D-Y, .shoup, S-H-O-U-P, @wildlife.ca.gov. And then while the Zoom chat feature is disabled, as I mentioned, you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions of staff and the panelists. Big thank you to both Commissioner Eric Sklar. He's chair of our Wildlife Resources Committee for the Commission, and of course is our immediate past president, who he was in that position for 5 years. I think it's a record. Then also from the commission, we have Ari Kornman, who is our wildlife advisor to the California Fish and Game Commission, as well as Cynthia McKeith. She's one of our analysts at the commission, and Karina Hong, who is our Sea Grant State Fellow at the commission. You met already, and thank you very much for those opening comments, Deputy Director Stafford Lair with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. He has a number of his team members joining him today, including Scott Gardner, who is chief of the wildlife branch for the department. Nathaniel Arnold is the chief deputy director for the law enforcement division of the department. Jennifer Aikimoto is the assistant chief at the law enforcement division. We have Vicki Monroe, the statewide conflict program coordinator for the wildlife branch. Rebecca Barboza is the wildlife biologist with the wildlife branch. And I have to mention our IT extraordinaire, Randy Shoup, from the Data and Technology Division, and a big thank you to him for all of his help in preparing for today and assisting on the technical side. We do have 4 speakers today. We will introduce them before each one begins speaking. To set the context for today, you're participating in what will be the first of at least 2 workshops related to coyotes in the urban environment. Commissioner Sklar provided a little bit of background information, but I wanted to mention that the catalyst for these 3 for this workshop and any subsequent workshops actually began a few years ago when the commission started hearing about increasing interactions between the public and coyotes in California's cities and towns. And then last year, just before the pandemic hit us, during the Wildlife Resources Committee's January meeting, there was a much more significant set of stories that emerged, and our Wildlife Resources Committee co-chairs asked the commission to consider ways in which we could better engage the public in this dialogue than is normally allowed during a standard commission meeting. And stakeholders were really appealing for action from the department and the commission. And so this idea was born, and commission asked staff to work with the department on a workshop of some sort or workshops to engage our stakeholders in a way, as I say, that's just not possible during commission meetings. So importantly to keep in mind today is that this is not about any single event or point in time or a response to any particular coyote issue. Today is really intended to elicit this broader conversation about coyotes in the urban environment. We're starting with some presentations about the scientific and jurisdictional framework that will help support an open and respectful conversation about human-coyote interactions today. We'll talk about community needs and about adaptive coyote management. It's also creating an opportunity for broader understandings and awareness and appreciation for a real diversity and legitimacy of views that we will hear, different perceptions and different attitudes about coyotes in California. It's also an opportunity to educate one another about urban coyote issues and individual concerns, as well as community concerns and needs. It's an opportunity to encourage active participation and communication and inquiry, asking lots of questions. Today is really about asking and hopefully answering a lot of questions. And then exploring and vetting some potential solutions with scientists and other experts in the field of human-coyote interactions. So today's a great opportunity and will set us up very nicely for the second workshop, which is expected to focus more on educational campaigns and local and regional coyote management plans. We hope to have participation from representatives and members of local and county governments to learn more about formulating and implementing these kinds of management plans. At the moment, we're looking at probably sometime around mid-May for that second workshop. And if you aren't already to stay informed and get the latest announcements, please do sign up for the Commission's electronic mailing list, and specifically for the Wildlife Resources Committee meeting agendas at the Commission website, which is fgc.ca.gov if you want to sign up. I suspect many of you are already on that list, but if you're not, please check it out, get yourself added, and that way we'll make sure that you get the announcement for the next workshop, as well as announcements about information that will come out from this workshop. All right, so that sets the context for today. I just want to check in with my co-hosts and co-panelists here and ask if there's any additional information that they would like to add.
I think we're ready to begin, Melissa.
Fabulous. All right. Then let's get started. We're going to start with, what does the science tell us? What do we know about the biology and human dimensions of coyotes and human-coyote interactions? Our first presentation today is going to be from Dr. Neve Quinn. She is the Human Wildlife Interactions Advisor with the University of California Cooperative Extension, based at the South Coast Research and Extension Center in Irvine. Her focus is directed on coordinating the University Cooperative Extension programming regarding human-wildlife conflicts, particularly within residential and industrial areas within Southern California. Her research and education focus on everything from mice to mountain lions, and she mostly focuses on coyotes, rodents, and urban wildlife management, as well as the effects of rodenticides on non-targeted wildlife. And so I would like to welcome Dr. Neve Quinn, and we will pull up her, I believe, Dr. Quinn, you have your presentation pulled up. You're ready to go. Excellent. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Just make sure I have this on the right screen. You guys see that okay?
We can.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Well, it's great to be here, and I just had a look at the participant list, and it's great, and I know that there's a lot of familiar names there, and so some of this will not be new to some participants, but it's just good to have a general refresher on some of the coyote ecology and the information that we have. But this presentation will be very, very brief, and hopefully loads of time for questions at the end of this session. So I wanted to touch briefly on some of the gaps that we have in urban coyotes in California. And we do know a lot about coyotes in general, but not specifically about urban coyotes. And these are two coyotes that are actually from our urban coyote program. One is a fantastic picture that was captured by Joanna Turner, of one of our collared coyotes, but we really don't know a lot. Like, we don't know even basic things like how many urban coyotes there are. We don't know a lot about their densities. We have clues from a lot of studies in agriculture, you know, things that like interface, but really we don't really know a lot. And that kind of stems down to what we know about their management, about hazing, about lethal control, and about their behavior. You know, what's an aggressive coyote, what's a habituated coyote, what leads to habituation, what leads to things like human attacks and bites. We really don't know really a whole lot about this. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we know, but you have to keep in mind that there are a lot of unanswered questions. And I always like to say when I talk about rodents that we know more about polar bears than we do about commensal rodents, but it's almost close with urban coyotes too. You know, we get clues here and there from some studies, but they really are kind of an understudied species, and we do need to learn more. And we're trying, and we are getting there. So for those of you that don't know, you know, the coyote, I think in a lot of our urban areas now is becoming very well known, but you know, they are similar to dogs, but there are some features that you can use to help you identify them, especially if you see them run really, really quickly. A lot of the time, if you see a canine unattended, it's usually a coyote, because in California, almost everywhere has leash laws. It's kind of unusual to see dogs running wild. But if you do, you know, look for things like upright ears, the long snout, the long kind of bushy upright tail. And people always ask me about the mean weight of urban coyotes in California. And I can only speak to the coyotes that we receive into our program in Southern California, but they are kind of between 22 and 25 pounds. That would be kind of in around the normal weight, but we do get like grown adults that are even smaller, but we also get grown adults that are even bigger. And so you can see here that we have you know, some dead coyotes that we receive from different cities. And we have some 37 pounders from fairly urban areas. And for those of you that are not familiar with Southern California, Rolling Hills is in Los Angeles County in the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And it's usually has fairly big lots. I wouldn't call it urban. You know, their lots are kind of between 3 and 5 acres. It's a very kind of literally rolling hills. Obviously Irvine and Costa Mesa are definitely much more what we consider kind of suburban areas, and these coyotes were definitely, these two big 37 pounders were received from very, very urban kind of suburban areas. And people always ask me, like, how do you tell the difference between tracks? And like, tracks can be difficult. And there's really great workshops to go. If you have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend. But usually it's a good idea to know the difference, especially if you're not sure if there's coyotes in your area, because they are kind of similar to dog tracks. Now, coyotes have, you know, you can usually see the 2 claws at the very, very front, whereas dogs generally, you know, you can see the 4 kind of toenails. Especially if you have nice soft soil. The thing about coyote footprints is that they're kind of spaced out. So I'll just get my pointer out here so I can explain this a little bit better. But you can see here that why there's like a nice piece of space in between the footprint here, and that really helps you determine the difference between a coyote and a dog. Now, coyotes are quite small and do have quite small feet, but obviously we can go everywhere from a German Shepherd to a Chihuahua, and so like size isn't always a really good indicator whether it's a coyote or not. And obviously coyotes do different size as well. So we've got these little guys that are at my office versus you know something like a small dog could have similar size footprints, but like the dogs is kind of sprawled out, the coyotes is a little bit more kind of compact and oval. So those are some things to keep in mind when you are trying to determine the difference between coyote and dog footprints. Now, poop is, you know, one of the things that I have to work with a lot, and it's not so glamorous, but a lot of us biologists have to deal with poop all the time. And people always ask me, I kind of get these name that poop emails into my inbox all the time, and people ask me, what is this? And it's really hard to determine what a scat comes out of when you just look at it. So when you just find it on the ground and you look at it and you think, is that a coyote? Is it a bobcat? Is it a, you know, is it some other mesocarnivore? And in California, there's such a wonderful amount of wildlife, and, you know, in urban, at the interface, in agriculture and natural resource areas, there really is an abundance of wildlife. And so it can be confusing and it can be very, very difficult. And there's research out there that shows that scats are about 50% misidentified even by experts. And so I always say with a little bit of caution that, like, you know, it might be a Coyote Scat, but like it could be several other things as well. And it's important to remember that what goes in has to come out again. And so hopefully nobody's enjoying their breakfast right now, but depending on what the coyote eats, it really affects the size, the structure, and the shape of their scat. And you can see there's like 4 different examples of coyote scats here, and like some that are very, very furry, some that are a little bit more uniform, and some that kind of have the twisted appearance that we would be most familiar with coyotes, and then some that are broken up like this because of what is in their diet. And so in general, we would say that a coyote scat is tubular and twisted and kind of has pointy ends. And it can vary in size, but it's generally soft, but that's only when it's fresh. Obviously it can harden up. And we would say that dog poop doesn't generally twist or fold, but if it's soft enough, it can fold over on itself. So just a word of caution for that, because domestic dog poop generally looks like this, but if it's soft enough, it can roll over on itself. And if you're, you know, I wouldn't ever recommend that you handle any kind of animal feces, even if you have gloves on. I mean, it's just, it's kind of like a repository for zoonoses. So please, please, please be careful when if you do try to handle and identify, because some people go and smell, and some of us, and I definitely know that there are people in the audience that know that there's a distinctive smell to a coyote scat, and that can help, but it's very hard to describe that smell. Now, I always say that, and I see it all the time, sometimes in the city that I live in, Southern California, sometimes you just see this thing dart out, like in the dark in front of you, you're not really sure what it is. And though I think the things that are really helpful are things like looking for those upright ears, and then the tail. Usually coyotes will carry their tail downwards when they're running like that. They're not like your dog that's all happy, and my big fluff ball here in the background, if you get to see him, like he almost always when he's walking will carry his tail slightly elevated off the ground. And also they have a very different body shape where their chest is very, very high. So coyotes are all legs, whereas our domestic dogs, they're kind of the structure of their chest dips down to about their elbows. So it always looks like coyotes have really, really long legs compared to our domestic dogs, but it's more to do with the shape of their actual their chest area, because that dips below. The dog dips below here, you can see at the elbows, whereas here it's way above the elbows. So that can be helpful if you're not sure what you've seen. And I forgot to test these before, but hopefully you guys can hear these vocalizations. And I can't, those two things, hopefully you guys can hear them clear enough, was actually, the first one was actually dogs, and then the one we played over it was actually coyotes. And so one of the theories is that coyotes have, you know, they're like, oh, there's loads of coyotes in my neighborhood, we hear them all the time, they're celebrating. That's just their communication time. They're very, very social animals. They get together at night. And there is a theory that some predators can make themselves sound like they are more than they are. And we don't know if that happens in coyotes, but it could be, it's kind of like a territory defense thing. It's kind of like, hey, there's more than there is here, so don't come anywhere near us. And this is one of the coyotes that I get to see regularly at my work. But you know, coyotes have very interesting social organization, and obviously their behavior is something that we need to know more about. But it can be very, very different. So it can be very, very different, you know, between packs and within packs. And generally what you get is resident groups or transients. So there's kind of two different coyotes, but even those coyotes can change themselves where residents can be transient, and then obviously transients can become part of a resident group as well. And we're not really sure what happens in the urban environment totally yet either, and we are learning more about that. And as we know, typically packs are composed of an alpha pair that are the breeding pair that are not closely related, and generally a lot of the other pack members are closely related, but there's kind of options. Once you're born into a pack, you can stay, you can leave, but actually kind of be like kind of associated with the pack. You can be totally like solitary and nomadic like a transient, or you can completely disperse from the area. And we have had one or two of our coyotes that we have collared, we've seen very clear dispersal events. And one of the differences between a transient and a resident pack is generally the size of the home range. And so if you look at this picture up on top here, these are kind of all the resident packs you know, spread across Cook County, which is obviously a fantastic study up in the very, very north of the US. And then below here, you can see in yellow, these are all the different transients. You can see that they're much, much, much larger. And it just goes to show how different the two types of coyotes behave. And so generally, the packs are formed for territory defense. And so pack size is generally affected by food abundance, mortality rates, and population densities. And so they're generally the main drivers for the size of a pack. You know, coyotes generally mate for life, and they're cooperative breeders. I think it just sounds like a great model for reproduction, where you have the two breeding pairs have pups, and then everybody else helps along, which just sounds like the dream for any working mother out there. Gestation lasts about 63 days, and generally the pups are born March to May, but it's kind of weather dependent a little bit. So like in the really warm areas, like kind of out towards the desert, you might see the pups come before, and then in the colder areas, maybe closer towards like Northern California, you might see them come slightly later as well. And then, you know, these little fuzzballs start to emerge from the dens kind of 2-3 weeks of age, but you don't really see them getting out and about until they're about 6 months old. Then the juveniles will disperse generally at about 6 to 8 months, but they obviously can stay as well, and they can disperse in groups and individuals. And during dispersal time, it does appear that conflict can rise also. Now, people always ask me about density, and I think it's really, really interesting, because what we're seeing is it definitely is very dependent on the individual. But what the research shows so far is kind of like our city coyotes have up to about 3.4 square miles, but our suburban coyotes can have as small as 0.4 square miles. And that's tiny. I mean, that's a really small home range. And this is one of our coyotes here that we have collared in Southern California, and his home range is minuscule. It's about this as well, but we also have other coyotes that have much, much larger home ranges. And so like that could be habitat dependent. It could be you know, certain behavior. We just really don't know. We're trying to find out more as we go along. One of the things that we see all the time is, you know, people always ask me, oh, I keep seeing coyote during the day. What does that mean? And it doesn't really mean anything. You know, coyotes will be active when their food is active. And so if they're going after things that they eat during the day, they'll be active during the day. If they're going after things that are at night, they'll be going at night. Now, some researchers say that increased daytime activity is kind of part of the scale that leads to habituated coyotes, and then obviously conflict. But coyotes that are active during the day are probably more likely to cause conflict as well, because of they're interacting with more people. And obviously conflict can be subjective, but I mean, you know, the rate of encounters of a coyote that are going to be active during the day is just going to be much higher than a coyote that's active at night. So something that we've done a lot of research on is Coyote Diet. And I think the Coyote Diet in Southern California has now been done to death. We're lucky that we have like such great studies on Coyote Diet, not just from our group, but from other folks like that are in the National Park Service also. And different aspects of the diet and different ways to investigate the diet have been done. And we we ran our study on stomach contents. So we received dead coyotes that we necropsied, and unfortunately my video is not playing, but that was a video of a necropsy. But we found all sorts of things. We found all sorts of rodents, obviously cat food, and then, really strange things like a red-eared slider. And I can't even imagine the amount of time it takes to poop out a red-eared slider. But, we used hair and all sorts of things like that as well. And we found that they ate, lots of wild rodents, commensal rodents, rabbits, things like that. But they ate commensal rodents. That we did find a significant number of pets and obviously human-related food items too. And by hard part analysis, we found cats at 15%. But when we compared that with our PCR analysis or our molecular analysis, it showed that 35% of the coyotes that we received had some evidence of cats inside their stomach. And what I want to mention briefly as well is that we found a very, very strong association between the areas where feral cat colonies are established and areas where we found coyotes that had cats in their stomach. And so we think that feral cat colonies may be attracting coyotes into neighborhoods. One of the other things that we're looking at is hazing, urban hazing, an appropriate management technique for urban coyotes in Southern California. And the question is, I don't really know. Currently, we have 19 coyotes collared across Los Angeles County, although this guy here is actually a female coyote is actually in San Bernardino County now, because she is one of the ones that clearly dispersed and crossed 2 freeways, crossed the 57, crossed the 71 very, very successfully. And so we've had a number of great successes, but we've also had a number of not so great successes. Coyotes are definitely an interesting study species to work with. This one, I think we had its mate chew its collar off its neck, which was not very well appreciated. And then this one here popped its collar as well. So we're making inroads on that, but it is a difficult study to do, and it's definitely not easy to trap coyotes, and definitely not during a pandemic. You can see pre-pandemic here, but you can notice that we're all masked up here, down here, and it's definitely an exciting ride. The last thing I want to mention is that it is important to collect information on coyote encounters to help municipalities better manage and educate their citizens. We do have a number of tools. Coyote Cacher is one of the ones that I manage, and it's more like an Amber Alert for your pets. We don't just want to make sure that everybody's aware that there are coyotes in the area. Most of the encounters here are just sightings. The red and the yellow ones are indicative of more serious encounters with pets. The one thing that I want to say is I don't want to say don't post on Facebook and Nextdoor, because those are really important tools to have with your community. I just want to say that the data that goes into Nextdoor and Facebook is lost for municipal managers. So please think about that. It is important to make sure that the information gets to the people that need it. And that's probably slightly over my time. But if we don't have any questions today, please feel free to contact me. That's my email address and my phone number. I won't answer my phone because I'm not in my office, but I do get voicemails. But if you want to contact us about anything, please do so. And then also please feel free to follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you want some more information about our projects that are ongoing, you can find those on my website. Thank you.
Great. And thank you, Dr. Quinn, so much. That was really fascinating. So much more to learn about coyotes in the urban environment, for sure. I know that there are folks in the workshop today who do have questions. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take the next presentation first, and that'll be from Dr. Alex Heron. And then we're going to have a Q&A with both Dr. Quinn and Dr. Heron, as well as Vicki Monroe with the department. She's the Human Wildlife Statewide Conflict Coordinator. She's going to join the panel to answer questions. So if you have questions for either of the presenters, please do make a quick note of them to yourself so you don't forget, and we will come back to the Q&A in just a few minutes. But at the moment, we're going to hear from Dr. Alex Heron. He is a research scientist, a statewide researcher for the Human Dimensions of Wildlife Conservation Unit at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And the Human Dimensions Unit, social science research focuses on how people interact with, how they value, and how they perceive wildlife, and how the public perceives wildlife issues in general. Alex has a PhD from Ohio State University and a master's from the University of Minnesota, and we're very pleased to have him with us today. Thank you, Alex. If you're ready, you can put up your presentation and take it away.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to begin by thanking the California Fish and Game Commission and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for hosting this workshop, and also for the invitation to speak today. I also wanted to thank the fellow panelists, as well as everyone out there who's participating today. As Deputy Director Stafford Lair and others mentioned, this is an issue that is people are really passionate about. There's a lot of strong feelings on both sides of the issue. So I really value the opportunity to be able to speak with folks today, and really appreciate the fact that so many people have taken time out of their Fridays to join us today to discuss this important issue. So in my introduction, my name is Alex Herron. I'm a research scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in the Wildlife Investigations Laboratory. And my specific research unit is the Human Dimensions Unit. So just because I know there's a lot of folks out there who may be unfamiliar with human dimensions, just wanted to provide a brief introduction of what is human dimension research. So human dimension research is using social science research to understand how people think and feel about wildlife. It also looks at how people interact with wildlife, what types of human behaviors are sort of generating issues with wildlife, how do human behavior, human interactions influence the way that wildlife behaves and interacts with people. So sort of understanding everything to do with people in terms of wildlife conservation and management. And then the other goal of human dimension research is incorporating the social science research into conservation and management decisions. So the California uses a science-based approach to conservation and management for wildlife, and social science complements the ecological and biological research for sound science-based management of natural resources. So the Human Dimensions of Wildlife Conservation Unit is a statewide program at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We look at all different issues related to fish and wildlife, ranging from hunting, fishing, angling, to human wildlife interactions, conflict, sort of a whole wide variety of different research subjects. So the specific work that right now that I'm working on with coyotes is understanding how Californians feel about coyotes and wildlife, understanding how Californians report encounters with coyotes, and working with communities to find socially acceptable solutions for human wildlife conflict. In other words, conflict transformation, which there's a lot of interesting new research on conflict transformation that I won't be able to get into for this presentation, but if you have questions or interest, it's definitely something that I'm very happy to talk about in the future. As mentioned, that even though my research looks at a whole variety of different issues, I really think that coyotes and human wildlife interactions with coyotes in California is probably one of my favorite topics, just because, again, coyotes are, not only are they interesting species, but there's a really interesting, diverse set of views about coyotes that the public has, and it's a really great opportunity for social scientists to study how people perceive wildlife issues. So the first one is understanding how Californians feel about coyotes and wildlife. One thing that I would like to point out is, as Dr. Neve Quinn spoke in the last presentation, that it's really difficult to have the coyotes. There's a lot of research gaps with coyotes. So currently it's hard to know how many coyotes are in the state. However, we do have information on the human population in the state. So looking at this, this is a density of humans in different counties from across California over the last several decades, just showing how human density has increased. So, Orange County and LA County in the 70s started off as a very similar population density of just approximately 700 people per square kilometer. Since then, Orange County has increased tremendously to around over 1,600 people per kilometer squared. Similarly, LA County has also increased, not to the same extent as Orange County, but again, and then Sacramento, which for those of us in Northern California, we're approaching where Orange County and LA County were in the 70s. So again, there's been a lot of changes in the human side, the human demographics in California, human population sizes, in addition to environmental changes such as catastrophic wildfire, drought. So all these impacts, in addition to populations of coyotes, really influence human-wildlife interaction. So one of the common questions that we get are there more coyotes now than there were in the past? And as Dr. Quinn mentioned, we don't really have the data to assess that question. What we can say is that there's been a lot of environmental and social changes within the human side of California that could also be contributing to reports of human-wildlife conflict. So one excellent study coming out of Colorado State University and Ohio State University, as well as some other of their research partners, is the American Wildlife Values Orientation. So if this is a topic that you find interesting, I highly recommend that you Google American Wildlife Value Orientations. They have a great website with all the reports from across the country about some of the data. I'm just going to go over a very brief overview of some of the data for California. But again, if you have interest, I definitely recommend checking out the study and the website for other information. So essentially, the Wildlife Value Orientation studies are a group of social science researchers who've developed a scale to measure how people perceive wildlife in different ways. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how these scales work or the exact specifics, because that's available on their online reports. Just to have a brief summary, there's two broad scales. One is a mutualistic scale. The other one is a traditionalist or utilitarian scale. The utilitarian traditionalist scale, of people who score highly on that scale tend to have strong support for hunting, fishing. They may also support lethal control of wildlife, whereas those scoring highly on the mutualist scale tend to have lower support for hunting, fishing, and lethal control. They're both folks have strong attitudes towards wildlife, and neither one is correct or incorrect. It's just different ways of perceiving how wildlife should be managed in the country. In addition to those two scales, there's a group called the pluralists who tend to score highly on both scales, and a group called the distance group who tend to score low on both scales. So the distance group are probably a lot of folks who, for whatever reason, are just feel that wildlife don't have a lot of significance to their daily lives. They're not really interested in the topic, or they're not really familiar with the topic. So as you can see from these from these pie charts, overall, California is quite different in the makeup of its human residents in the ways that they perceive wildlife from the United States population as a whole. We have a higher proportion or higher percentage of folks who score highly on that mutualist scale, and a lower percentage of those who score highly in the traditionalist scale. Additionally, we also have a higher percentage of folks who score highly on the distance scale, meaning that they feel that wildlife maybe don't bear a lot of relevance to their daily lives. So this has implications for wildlife management, in that individuals in California are likely to have very different views and support for different policies than perhaps places in the other parts of the country. So, studies or policies that work in other parts of the United States may not be a great fit for cities in California. Additionally, a lot of the research looks at the difference between the mutualist and the traditionalist individuals. I also think it's important to note the distance individuals. So in California has a higher percentage of people who feel sort of disassociated from wildlife. That's going to have implications for how we outreach and communicate about wildlife issues with those residents. So this study from Colorado State University and Ohio State University, the American Wildlife Values Project, also specifically asked questions about coyotes and other species in California. So again, The full list of questions that they asked and the summary is available online. The one that I think is super relevant for this workshop is a question that asked percentage of Californian respondents who believe that coyotes that kill pets in residential areas should be lethally removed. So 30% of Californians in their survey agreed with that statement, and 53% disagreed with that statement. The remaining percent were either uncertain or had no opinion about the question. So just some quick implications from this study, or set of studies, I should say, that Californians have diverse opinions about how to respond to human-wildlife conflict. About a fifth of Californians feel distance from wildlife issues, which can have implications for how we communicate or connect with those residents about coyotes or other types of wildlife. And there is disagreement about the acceptability of lethal control for coyotes. Again, I think everyone here at this workshop is already sort of already knew that's coming in, that this is a controversial topic. People that have strong feelings about it, but I think it's just it's worth repeating that even though people have strong opinions and may disagree, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're anti-wildlife or anti-pet. It just means that there are different views of how wildlife should be managed and conserved. So again, it's important to try to search for common ground. And again, I know it's a sensitive and topic that people are passionate about, but it's also important to make sure that we respect the wide variety of and diversity of opinions and beliefs in California. So one other thing that I would like to speak about today is understanding how Californians report encounters with coyotes. So Dr. Quinn mentioned the Coyote Cacher, which is an excellent resource for reporting interactions with coyotes. Regardless of what reporting tool you use, there's Coyote Cacher, iNaturalist, there's other cities have different reporting hotlines, but regardless of what reporting tool is used, our reporting systems are measures of human behavior, not coyote behavior. So in addition, in order to get a report about a human-wildlife interaction or a coyote sighting or an encounter with coyote, there's a lot of things that have to happen. First, an encounter has to actually occur. Secondly, the person who experienced the encounter has to be aware of reporting tools and know how to use those reporting tools to make the report. And also, additionally, they have to have a desire or motivation to report. So if they're not aware of the reporting tools, or they don't have the ability to report, maybe they don't have an internet connection, or maybe they have other, maybe they don't have the time, they have a busy work schedule or other factors, or they don't think that it's important to report the interaction, or they don't have a desire to report interaction. That report is never going to get made, and that data won't ever make it into any reporting system. So again, just wanted to, one of the big takeaways from looking at the research for reporting tools is that they can be very useful resources, but again, there's a lot that goes into the data set that needs to be taken into consideration in order for the results to be interpreted correctly. So for this presentation, I am just using data from the iNaturalist system. iNaturalist is a community or citizen science program operated through the California Academy of Sciences and National Geographic. The reason why I'm using the data set from this particular data set is that it's one of the longer running platforms for reporting sightings of wildlife, and also that all the data is free and publicly accessible. So if you have, I'm sure some of you might already be familiar or using iNaturalist, but if you want to look at the data in more detail yourselves, you're able to go to the iNaturalist website and download the data for coyotes or any other species of wildlife, plant, any other species in California, and have that data to look through for oneself. And again, iNaturalist, it's not a tool designed to report human-wildlife conflict or encounters. A lot of these reports are sightings, but again, the principles remaining behind the reporting tool are the same. That again, there's a lot that has to go into a report before it actually gets entered into the data system and being able to be reviewed by a scientist. So this graph is a combination of data from iNaturalist and then the U.S. Census, just for the map of California. The green dots represent iNaturalist coyote reports that came from non-urban areas as defined by the US Census. The gray dots are reports from urban areas, as the urban areas being defined as the US Census definition. So you can see that, again, a lot of the dots are really clustered around urban areas in the Bay Area, Southern California, and Sacramento in Northern California. Again, I'm looking at the data over time. So the top graph shows the number of reports per month over the last 10 years or so, just the total number of reports. So you can see that if this data is just examined by itself, it does seem that there is a large increase in the number of coyotes being reported. However, one issue is going back to that previous slide that I showed is that it's hard to, you can't necessarily take the data, the total reports at face value without considering the fact that iNaturalist has many more users now currently than it did back in 2010, 2011. Just because the system has been around longer, more people are aware of it, and more people are using it to make reports now. So if you look at the number of coyote reports as a percentage of all reports for all the sightings of mammals that were entered into iNaturalist, you can see that it's a very different picture. That there's looks like to be some seasonal variability and reports peaking in the times when throughout the year, but it doesn't seem to be a tremendous the same tremendous increase in the number of reports once you factor in the fact that more people are using iNaturalist now than they were in the past. And again, all this data is from iNaturalist and the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which works with iNaturalist. So again, this data is available for folks to look at on their own if they want to go look at, test other research questions or test other ideas. So again, implications for this data is it's important to understand the motivations for reporting human and wildlife encounters in order to make sure that it is interpreted correctly. Again, the reporting information is really a measure of human behavior, human desire to report coyotes rather than information about human-wildlife conflicts. Just because there can be human-wildlife conflicts that occur that don't get reported, or sometimes not everything that is reported is not actually a conflict. It could be a sighting or other concern about coyotes. So again, it is difficult to use reporting tools to assess trends in human-coyote conflict. That being said, citizen and community science is an important tool for outreach and communication. So again, these are the individuals who are making these reports. It highlights who is making reports and what areas reports are being made from. Those could be great ambassadors for information and outreach, working with folks to spread messages about how to respectfully treat wildlife and try to prevent human-wildlife conflicts from occurring. So again, just touching back onto some of my broader research objectives for coyote research is understanding how Californians feel about coyotes and wildlife, so that way we can make sure that we take those views and considerations and make sure the messaging is salient and relevant to individuals in different communities, and also to make sure that the culture or human population in Southern California might be different than Northern California. San Diego might be different than LA. Making sure that communication and research is targeted to the specific values and perceptions of individuals in specific communities. Understanding how Californians report encounters with coyotes, as well as the last one is working with communities to find socially acceptable solutions for human-wildlife conflict or conflict transformation. Again, the previous two objectives all tie into that, and that's where I'll leave it for now, just because that's a great teaser for, I believe our future workshops, looking at how to find great or acceptable solutions for responding to conflict with wildlife and coyotes. So again, if you have, I know I breezed through that pretty quickly just because I want to make sure there's time for questions for the panel. If you have further questions or want to discuss anything further, please contact me. My email address is here. As you hopefully you can tell that this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So I'm very happy to talk about anything in the future related to coyotes. And also below are all the references or additional information in case you're interested in some of the data that I presented on. Thank you again for taking the time to join me this morning.
And thank you, Dr. Heron. We really appreciate your presentation and the information that you shared. We do have a lot of questions that are coming in for both of our speakers. Before we go to the Q&A for the presentations, I do want to introduce one other individual who's going to join the panel. As I mentioned earlier, Vicki Monroe, who is the statewide conflict program coordinator for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, has been with the department since 2014. Prior to joining the department, she oversaw an urban wildlife management program in Northern Virginia. She also served as the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Wildlife Subcommittee Chairman. She has a bachelor's in psychology, emphasizing animal behavior from Colorado State, and a master's in zoology from James Cook University in Australia. And she says that she is a Colorado native. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vicki. Really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, we do have quite a few questions that have come in. Some of them do tend to overlap a little bit with the focused discussion questions that we had identified on the agenda. So we may end up answering some of those at the same time we're doing the Q&A for the presentations. One of the questions is related to coyote populations. And obviously, Dr. Heron, you had mentioned that, as well as Dr. Quinn, I believe. But this is related to the sense of, has the population increased either regionally and statewide in the urban environment versus the more natural wild environment, et cetera? And who would like to take that first?
I can take it if, and then Dr. Quinn can add in any information that I missed. So again, as Dr. Quinn and I mentioned, there's an absence of long-term data on coyote populations in California. So we're not, as scientists, we're not able to say definitely whether or not the population has increased. What I can say is that it seems with increase in the human population, more human food-related items on the landscape, and an increase in human development, that it's a reasonable hypothesis that has resulted in an increase in coyote populations as well in specific areas. However, that's right currently is just a hypothesis that's not yet tested by the data. But
yeah, I would concur with Alex and say that coyotes have probably both expanded their range and their densities in urban areas in California.
Okay. The next question, and this one may be for Dr. Quinn. Have you made any comparisons between ailing coyotes suffering from mange and their attraction or presence to urban areas and hence easier access to food and such?
Well, I can only speak for the coyotes that we cover, which are from Los Angeles County and Orange County in Southern California, and 99% of our sample does not have mange. So at least they appear outwardly to not have mange, no signs of mange, no loss of fur, things like that. So we don't have a very large mange population to compare to, the mange coyotes, like the non-mange coyotes. So, at least 99 out of 100 of our coyotes don't have mange.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. Is there a difference in lifespan? Is there any research that is looked at the lifespan of urban coyotes versus the rural or wild coyotes?
I don't believe in California that there is. There obviously is other urban coyote research is out there, but most of the urban coyote studies have been done in Chicago, and Chicago and California are just so different. Even the diet of the coyote is so different. Like the interactions with humans are very, very different. And we know, it's very hard to age a coyote when you're in the field. It's kind of more, you have to kind of retrospectively figure out how old they are. And so we know from our studies that there are urban coyotes that are up to 8 or 9 years old that we receive into our lab. But there was a tagged coyote recently recovered in Northern California. And they're still trying to figure out the age from it, and you have to send off the teeth for cementum analysis, and there's only one lab in the whole entire country that does it. And it's not even when I lived in Ireland, we were sending our carnivore teeth to the same lab in the United States. So it's not just like it's one lab in the whole of North America. It's nearly like a very specialized place for people to age their carnivores. And but this coyote, they reckon that they tagged it in the 80s. And so it's almost unbelievable that a coyote would live that long, but that certainly is a good example of a wily coyote. But it is very variable. Most of the coyotes that we would get, and they're a mix between coyotes that have been trapped, coyotes that have been roadkill, coyotes that have been euthanized for health and safety reasons, whether it's, biting an animal or some other incident. They're generally fairly young, so usually between 1 and 2 years of age, or up to about 3 or 4 as well. So it is very variable, but we don't know the difference. And I only really deal with urban coyotes, so I don't really see what happens out in the boonies.
Okay. I'm going to go back here for a second. Can one of you say a little bit about coyotes and where do they originate? Where are they native to? Are they native to California? Do they start somewhere else in the US and then migrate out from there? What do we know about coyotes and where they originated?
So coyotes are a native species to California. They are native throughout North America. They're the most widely dispersed native carnivore canid that we have. They actually have found fossil evidence of coyotes in the La Brea tar pits. It's just extraordinary. So a lot of folks sometimes believe that perhaps they've dispersed as their range has expanded into California, and that this is relatively recent, maybe within the past couple of decades or 100 years, but they have been here.
Great, thank you. Not sure, I think this is for Dr. Quinn, I could be wrong, but do we have any information about the contents, the stomach content for coyotes and anticoagulant rodenticides? Is there any correlation there?
So correlation, we don't know yet, but yes, our coyotes are exposed to anticoagulant rodenticide. 99% of our sample is exposed to anticoagulant rodenticide, but 99% of our sample has not died from rodenticide, which doesn't mean that there aren't any sublethal effects or future lethal impacts. But it's also interesting that 99% of our coyotes don't have mange, even though they are exposed to rodenticide. So yeah, we know a lot about rodenticide, and we continue to study the exposure of coyotes to anticoagulant rodenticides and other pesticides.
Great, thank you. This is an interesting question. It's related to sterilization. If one of an alpha pair is sterilized, will the remaining alpha continue as monogamous, or will it replace the non-performing coyote?
I'll take that one. That's a great question. The non-performing coyote.
I thought that was a great way to put it.
It's phenomenal. We see even now with coyote pairs and family groups, they're not always truly monogamous. Sometimes there'll be an alpha male and up to 2 females. Typically they are monogamous though, and it makes sense that from a hormonal standpoint, during breeding season, if they're not exuding those hormones, they're not showing that level of interest potentially, depending on the type of sterilization that's been conducted, that yeah, they would probably expand their family group and expand their horizons.
I like that, expand their horizons.
Nice way to put it.
For those, especially for those non-performing coyotes.
Exactly.
Great. This one may be for Dr. Heron. I could be wrong. Is there potentially a greater sensitivity? This is related to the public reporting sightings of coyotes. Is there not a greater sensitivity to contact in urban areas than in rural? So for instance, rural folks probably see coyotes pretty often, or wild critters in general may not be as sensitive to, oh, I should report this.
Definitely, yeah. So I definitely agree. Yeah, we again, this is one of those things that we currently don't have necessarily the data, but I'd say that's sort of getting back to sort of like the motivations for reporting, that if you are in a urban area and you're not necessarily familiar with seeing the coyotes a lot, that's going to be something more likely they're going to take the time out to report it. Whereas if it's something that you see every day, you're probably not going to end up making reports every day on iNaturalist. So I think it's again definitely there's definitely a lot of cultural and social factors and whether or not individuals make reports.
Great. I'm not sure who this would go to, but maybe Vicki. Are members of the public or citizens able to access reports on how many coyotes have been trapped or taken in a particular area?
So that's a great question. So the department doesn't necessarily maintain those sorts of records. We don't perform trapping services commercially. So typically trapping would occur, possibly through a private trapper, maybe through a county trapper or USDA Wildlife Services. So if we had those records, obviously we would, that's public records. Of course, we'd be willing to share, but we don't maintain those sorts of records typically.
Okay, good to know. One of the questions, several questions related to removal of problem coyotes and how we manage how that would affect coyote populations. So if a problem coyote is removed, does that have any impact on the coyote population in general? And is that an effective means for reducing human wildlife conflict?
I could take that one. So I think probably what people are referring to is responsive reproduction, where there is a model that shows that if you remove a certain percentage of the coyote population, that it can kind of almost shove all the other cooperating non-breeding females into estrus, so they would have the ability to reproduce. And removing 30, you have to essentially remove 30% of the population for that to happen. So removing individual coyotes is unlikely to cause responsive reproduction, probably in the same manner that coyotes are killed by cars. Coyotes, we have hundreds of coyotes actually killed by cars in a year in Orange County alone, which is more than the sum of the total that would be removed from lethal control. But obviously there's other contributing factors to death as well. But it depends on what kind of conflict you're trying to solve. If you have a pack of coyotes and you remove one coyote because it's eating cats, if there's still free roaming cats in the area, the rest of the coyotes are going to still try and prey on those free roaming cats. But it depends, but if it's a coyote that's, being a badly behaved coyote, like either biting a human or displaying behavior that may lead biologists to think that they're going to bite a human, that's kind of a complex question. That if you remove that behavior, the idea is that the other coyotes are behaving quote unquote normally, and that would be an effective strategy for removing that coyote, or for removing that behavior.
And adding on to what Dr. Quinn just said, the thing to focus on there is targeted removal. So if it's in response to a public safety incident, targeted removal would likely be appropriate. And it is something that from a forensic standpoint, we want to confirm the animal. We want to do appropriate testing, see if there is a disease occurrence or some other co-occurring factor that might be influencing that behavior, whether it's, again, a disease process like rabies or something like that, or if it's just dependent specifically on that individual animal.
Right. And we will have a presentation in a little while from Chris Stutz with the Department's Law Enforcement Division. We'll talk a little bit about what is a public safety incident. So we'll learn more about that. And some of the questions that are coming in, just for members of the public, some of the questions that are coming in via the Q&A will be answered by our presentations, our next panel. So I'm going to hold off on those. We'll get to those when we have those panelists. Since we did talk about this just a moment ago in a slightly different context, but in general, is birth control an effective method to manage coyote populations?
So I'll probably defer to Dr. Quinn to provide a little bit more of the science behind that, but I did quickly, just for our folks participating in this, to clarify that there are typically three types of fertility control. So it'd either be surgical sterilization, hormonal disruptors, or immunocontraceptives, which is essentially birth control inserted into under the animal's skin and then kept on the body. So depending on those varying techniques that might be used, there are varying levels of efficacy and then feasibility as it pertains to a certain area. So, Neve, did you want to add anything else to that?
I think like birth control is just so complicated. I mean, if you think of even just human birth control and how complex that can be, and it has like, it doesn't work all the time. You have to take it at the same time every day, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to birth sterilization and birth control for all wildlife. The problem is that how you control, like what conflict, once again, you're trying to control. So if you're trying to prevent coyotes eating cats, trying to sterilize them just because they don't have any testicles doesn't mean that they're not still going to eat cats. And then the other question that I always get is, well, if birth control does work and it reduces the population, does that mean that they'd eat less cats? And it could, but it could also mean that there's less competition. They could switch their prey to, like, now the cats are there's just more cats available for, a smaller number of coyotes. And so it could go either way. It's so unknown. And I am definitely not signing up for that study, that's for sure. That would be a very complicated one to undertake.
Great, thank you so much. And so speaking of studies, there was a question a little earlier about, there's still so much to learn, obviously, about urban coyotes. And there was a question about, there's a urban coyote research project, apparently Stanley Gert, I think is how it's pronounced. The question is about, don't we know a lot about coyotes as a result of that program?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier on that there's definitely a lot of coyote studies out there, but California is very different. And I think a lot of what Dr. Heron talked about is, like, even our perception to wildlife in California is completely different than Chicago. And we know that the diets of coyotes are different. We know that the structure of the landscape in Chicago is different. And so when you look at our coyotes and how they use the landscape, like there's not nursery, miles and miles of nurseries for coyotes to get around in the city of Chicago, where in Southern California, it's just so different. And I'm not saying that they use the space very, very differently, but we know that they eat very, very differently. We know that they interact with humans very, very differently. And so it is likely that they use the landscape differently as well, but we just don't know enough.
Dr. Heron?
Oh, yes. So, and I actually worked with some Dr. Gert's graduate students when I was at Ohio State. And I'll just echo what Dr. Quinn said, is that Chicago is different both socially, but also just, as anyone from the Midwest can attest to, the a Chicago winter is very different than Southern California. Again, the other research is great, and I think there is a lot to learn from it. However, when it comes to applying those lessons, I believe some of the other questions are about the similar topic, is that for coming up with solutions or management plans, it's really important that the management plan is focused on the specific needs of community and its specific locale. And so it's always difficult to try to generalize research from other areas to, there's lessons to be learned, but it's hard to take those verbatim and apply to any specific location without making sure that, without first assessing the local ecosystem and the local culture and community. So, and I think this is, again, one of the purposes of these workshops is to sort of begin to generate that sort of the social network, the framework within California, so that we can have those discussions at both statewide, regionally, and at a local scale.
Great, and that's a great promo for the next workshop, which one of the things that we'll be focused on there is looking at those community plans, whether it's a city or maybe a county or region, developing those management plans. Great, thank you. So question about, and again, for the public, just to know, some of these questions are very much related to this afternoon's, or not this afternoon's, but the later presentations that we'll have starting after the break. And so we're going to hold off on those. But one of the questions is it true that once a coyote is habituated to human food sources, that it's no longer, there's no other option, that coyote's forever going to be attracted to that, and eventually they're going to get euthanized is the only way to get rid of them? Is that true?
So I'll jump in for the first part of the response. You know, coyotes are highly intelligent and they're highly adaptive. Their diets, as Dr. Quinn mentioned and Dr. Heron noted, are incredibly diverse. So if you were to remove a human food source, they would still find food elsewhere. They haven't lost their ability to hunt. They're not going to allow themselves to starve if there's another food source. Now, being highly intelligent as they are, will they still be drawn towards the easier, more easily accessible food or attractant? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. That's part of that, survival drive and that instinct. And again, they're highly intelligent, highly social animals. So short answer, if they learn to love cat food, are they only going to ever be able to eat cat food or be attracted to that? No, but if it's left out, will they continue to attempt to access it? Yes.
Excellent. We have a number of folks asking questions about things like hazing, or what are the methods by which to, when you do have a coyote who has become habituated or has decided to visit a local community and is beginning to interact with humans more and more often, how is hazing effective? Is that something that folks can use? And are there other non-lethal methods for encouraging that coyote to leave?
I can start that, and then Vicki and Neve can add on to anything I missed. So one of Dr. Quinn's studies is looking at the effect of hazing, to sort of look at that from trying to collect data, scientific data to address that question. So anecdotally, it's hazing does seem to work for some people's situations, that they do find it an effective method for but again, only under certain circumstances. So again, when we I guess to take a step back for folks who aren't familiar with the term, hazing refers to sort of scaring the coyote away, trying to reinstate that sort of natural fear of humans. So again, for that to be effective, first of all, human safety is the foremost issue of concern. So we only recommend folks haze coyotes if they believe they can do it safely, if they feel like that they're not comfortable doing it, or that they're unable to scare the coyote off. That's then that it's better for them to not engage in hazing at that point. We find that effective ways of hazing can be including shouting, waving your arms, trying to make yourself look large and scary. For folks who aren't maybe a little bit more soft-spoken like myself, if you're not comfortable yelling, like a can full of stones or pebbles or coins can make a rattling noise. That coyotes have good hearing, so that's kind of an unpleasant noise for them that can try to reinstate that fear of humans. For other methods, again, and I believe the later panels will also discuss some of these options because some of them depend on your an individual city's rules and building codes. There's lights, sort of motion detected lights can scare off coyotes. There's either products or tools that an individual can build called coyote rollers that they can be added onto fences where in cases where that's allowed for building codes, that makes it more difficult for the coyote to get over a fence or over a wall. But again, and I think this is going to be a common theme, is the number one non-lethal method for preventing human-wildlife conflicts with coyotes is, again, removing that attractant. So removing food sources. If you feel that all the food sources are removed from your yard and you're still having issues with coyotes, then it's time to have a polite conversation with other folks in your neighborhood to make sure that they're aware of the issue, that they are removing their food attractants. So again, I know folks have a lot of different opinions about non-lethal versus lethal methods, but I think one commonality is, again, trying to prevent problems from occurring in the first place by removing attractants such as food and water.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think that one of the important things to consider as well is that, like, not all coyotes are aggressive either, right? I mean, there's coyotes that are just being coyotes, and there's coyotes that are, badly behaved coyotes, and it's hard to determine sometimes what those are, which makes this even more complicated. There's very little evidence that hazing works, which doesn't mean there's very little evidence that hazing doesn't work as well. So that's what we're trying to figure out is does hazing really move coyotes away from areas? But the problem is, in Southern California is where they move to, and that's what we need to figure out, is like what kind of space they're using and what kind of space they will use when they're hazed. It's very difficult to study how how others' behaviors will change. So, like, will hazing decrease the amount of pets that are attacked? It's very hard to measure that. And Alex kind of mentioned some of the tools that were used to collect information, and it's more about human behavior than actual coyote behavior. So trying to collect that information accurately is difficult. And I know people get very frustrated about, like, study after study after study, but I am a scientist and that's what I do. And it's then the policymakers' jobs to take those studies and make the best decision on how what's the most appropriate response to urban coyotes. But hazing is just a complicated one because we really don't know what happens. The number one way to stop coyotes attacking your pets is to not present the opportunity for your pets to be attacked. And so, like, we know that that's one way to solve the conflict, and hazing may be something that makes it better. But I also think that you need to make coyotes feel uncomfortable in urban areas, and hazing could be one way that works. But it's just, we just know so little right now about how it actually functions.
Yeah, so Dr. Quinn, I think what you're getting to is this, and Dr. Heron, you were getting to essentially prevention, right? That's part of it, right? To even hopefully avoid the need for the hazing. We want to try, and this, one of the questions we have is, why wait for an attack or some sort of interaction rather than focusing on the prevention element? And that's definitely what I think we're encouraging is prevention, and what does that look like? And that will certainly be a big part of the next conversation, is prevention and management and overall management of coyote populations. those human wildlife conflicts. And so moving from those individual coyotes then, from thinking about just individual or a handful of coyotes, there's a question about widespread coyote eradication. So is widespread eradication even an effective method for potentially reducing conflict in an urban area?
So again, I can take the first shot of this, and then Vicki and Neve can add in anything I miss. One of the things that I've reviewed studies, again, performed elsewhere in the country, scientific studies that looked at coyote exclusion from certain areas to see what impact removing coyotes has on sort of the local ecosystem versus the control group where no exclusion occurred. So in those studies, they use very aggressive coyote removal techniques, ranging up to having professional sharpshooters from planes remove coyotes. So even in those most aggressive lethal control that would not be feasible in an urban area or suburban area, they were not successful at totally eradicating coyotes. They were successful at reducing the population while those control measures were in place, but there were still coyotes on the landscape. So a lot of people asked about coyote eradication, and I guess my response is that there is no full eradication. No, that's not a possibility in California. Is that there's coyotes are really adaptable species. They've have persisted in areas with that have had long depredation, deep depredation and anti-predator policies in the past historically. That I guess is one thing. Just again, I think it's important to manage expectations that a coyote-free landscape is not a possibility, even if it would be desirable. Which I think again, folks would have different opinions about that. As a scientist, coyotes do provide a lot of important ecosystem benefits, and have folks would for a lot of folks have intrinsic value as well. So I guess in terms of other large-term sort of coyote removal, lethal control removal, the issue is that a lot of them are very hard to implement in urban areas, just given the way that the land is distributed, and folks have without infringing on folks' homeowners sort of jurisdiction. So a lot of the so-called eradication measures that might work in sort of open rural areas are not feasible in urban areas. And again, I think Dr. Quinn showed that those a lot of some of her research looking at the coyote home ranges, and a lot of those home ranges can be fairly small. So what removing coyotes from sort of a neighboring rural area may not have an effect on neighboring urban areas. Again, it sort of depends on the crossover and the size of the local the coyotes ranges.
And I want to add on to what Alex said, just reiterating that, from a natural resource management perspective, we recognize again, like Alex mentioned, the intrinsic value of native terrestrial predators. I mean, they are a key part of the ecosystem and the landscape. So it goes beyond just the feasibility of a widespread eradication or extirpation. We don't want that. That's not a management approach that is really appropriate. However, a key priority and what we are looking to support is ensuring human safety and public safety and human health. And so finding that balance in which we're supporting safe co-occurrence, coexistence, that's really the key.
Great, thank you. So this one is a little bit in between, but while we're on this theme, What is opportunistic lethal removal of coyotes, and is it an effective method?
Opportunistic lethal removal. So that's, there's a key distinction between what we mentioned previously, which is targeted removal of problem animals, primarily as it pertains to public safety. So opportunistic removal would be if there was a trapping season or a period of trapping in which any animal that was able to be safely trapped and humanely euthanized would be. So that would be the key difference.
Great, thank you. This is I'm not sure who could answer this question, but this is an interesting one. A lot of talk about data collection for various purposes. And someone's asking about whether or not some of the private trappers or pest control agencies and other wildlife control operations, is any of that data being used to help inform what we know about urban coyotes?
Well, we receive a lot of tracked coyotes from, wildlife trappers in Southern California. And I know some of my colleagues in Northern California have similar relationships with other, like either agencies or organizations that do lethal removal. So we, our sample is made up of coyotes that are, well, not 100%, but a proportion of it is made up from coyotes that were lethally removed from urban areas in LA and Orange County.
Melissa, maybe I can step in here a little bit. So under state law, the department issues both pesticide trapping licenses and rehabber licenses. So those data systems right now are in a state of transformation, and we're trying to get better quality control, getting that information into an accessible database form so that we can have better reporting out of the numbers of animals that are taken across the licenses that the department issues. It was a clunky system, and we are working to refine that and reform that so that we can get better, accurate information. Just to be clear, everyone who's issued a license is required to report what they take under those licenses. So we need to have that data management system. And I'll just say that data management systems within the state of California are very difficult to get stood up and manage and keep them operational. There's a lot of system controls in place and a lot of layers control agencies, but we are striving to improve that data reporting and data stream network.
Good to know. Thank you. This one's a little bit different, but back to the interaction of coyotes with other species. Question about, so if somehow we reduce the population of coyotes in an urban environment, since they're very good at keeping rodent populations down, would we expect then that we would have an even larger rodent problem?
I could take that one. So in general, predators are not good at controlling our selected species, which are things like rodents. Like they're animals that are good colonizers, animals that have really high reproductive rates, things like that. So like rabbits, a lot of our commensal rodent species, so our roof rats or our nori rats, if you're in like LA or the Bay Area, they just have such high reproductive rates. Like, so they're having so many babies that like the coyotes come along and they eat like some rats, but they don't kind of keep up with the the kind of the amount of reproduction that they're able to have. And so they're very opportunistic as well. So they're not like other predators that like focus on one thing. So like if coyotes only ate rats, yes, they might have a chance, but because they eat rabbits and they eat rats and they eat cats and they like, red-eared sliders and they eat baseballs and upholstered furniture and all, like we found like bedazzled jewels and everything in our coyote stomach. So because they're so opportunistic, it's kind of interesting. Even if there was less of them, they could still eat the same amount of prey, because it kind of depends on what they encounter. So when people say, oh, if there's less coyotes, doesn't that mean that they'll eat less cats? Well, not necessarily. Because they're very opportunistic, they almost eat what's in front of them. And so if there's like whatever lands in front of them is what they're going to eat, because any wild animal wants to eat the easiest food that's available to them, because it's kind of this trade-off between the energy that they expend and like the risk that they take to get that food. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, that's for sure.
All right. Okay. Again, so members of the public, we're about at that time. We're going to go into general public comment. I'm just double checking here. A number of these questions we're going to answer with the next panel presentations. So just hang tight for some of those questions related to jurisdiction and who can do what, when and where, and developing management plans, et cetera. The one question, actually, no, that one I'm going to hold for later. That also is related to that. So I think what we'll do then is we're going to go ahead and open it up for general public comment. So big thank you to our speakers this morning and our panel for being in the hot seat and answering all these questions. A big thank you also to Rebecca, who, for those who aren't aware, she's trying to answer as many of the questions in the Q&A that weren't intended specifically for the panelists. She's working hard behind the scenes there, trying to get questions answered for everyone. So Cynthia, I believe, is going to help us walk through the general public comment period. If you do want to comment or ask additional questions, if you could please raise your hand in Zoom. If you are on the phone and you would like to raise your hand, you can do that by pressing *9 on your phone. If you press *9 a second time, you will take yourself out of the queue. So if you're on the phone and you want to speak, then please press *9 once and be patient. We will get to you. Cynthia, who do we have?
Yeah, okay, we have Rebecca Dimitrick. I'm going to let you go first, and she'll be followed by Gary Ray Gray.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thanks. I just really quickly, I want to thank you guys so much for putting this on. It's been many years needed and in coming, and thank you very, very much. That's all I wanted to say. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Gary Ray Gray, you can speak now, and then we'll have Susan Danielson.
Yes, I'd like to second this, the thank yous regarding your presentations. They really were thorough and enlightening. I have sort of two quick questions. One, how do we, I'm from Northern California, Sacramento, how do we respond to people who are just recently saw a coyote walking around a street or through a yard, a front yard, and who immediately want to, you know, shoot it? That's the first question.
Oh, no, they're going to have me on.
And the second question is, if someone is walking along the street with their dog and they see a coyote walking down the street who's not being aggressive, how should that person respond? And I'm asking the question because I want to make sure that we can tell people how to respond appropriately when they see a coyote and not panic.
Thank you very much for those questions. And those are actually very much related to the presentation this afternoon from Chris Stutes. In general, he'll be sharing some information about how to report interactions, how to report sightings, or when is it the appropriate time to report, when is it not, that sort of thing. And so I would ask folks to please be patient and hang on. He's going to go into that in his presentation. And then we'll probably talk about that in more detail during the Q&A, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have Susan Danielson. You may need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there I did. Hi. Yes, I'm a volunteer for Carolyn Verville with Sunshine Haven Wildlife Rehabilitation in Southern California, Riverside area. And she was not able to make this. And she is concerned because I guess the laws or rules change with California. She wanted to know, is she to be, or are we to be rehabbing coyotes that are injured or orphaned, or are we supposed to turn them over to animal control for euthanasia? I guess that changes season to season.
That's an interesting question. I wasn't aware that that changes from season to season, but perhaps Vicki, I don't know if you are familiar with the rehab system and how that works, or if there
Yes.
might be someone else who'd be more appropriate.
Perhaps I'm happy to take that. So thank you for that question, Susan. Did you say, I missed the first part, did you say that you're a wildlife rehabilitator?
She works with a wildlife rehabilitator who couldn't attend.
Oh, okay, good clarification. So we have approximately 85 permitted wildlife rehabilitation facilities, and that includes individuals, groups, or formal centralized actual facility locations. And year round, per the conditions of the memorandum of understanding, and if they're in compliance with their permit, they are able to take in sick or injured or orphaned coyotes. Obviously, the orphaned coyotes, that would be more of a seasonal intake. But sick or injured, if they're complying with the conditions of their MOU and the permit is valid and active, they are able to take that animal in. Strongly recommend that, if a coyote is taken, brought in outside of pupping season, it's an adult, it's injured or showing signs of illness or disease, please notify us. And then we need to walk through the steps of, evaluating humane euthanasia, what the long-term plan is going to be and what needs to occur, what's most appropriate.
Okay, all right.
Oh, Melissa, you're on mute.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I was just asking the individual whether or not that answered her question.
I guess so, because it's really not my question. I'm asking for the licensed rehabber. She just wanted to be sure that, I don't know if it's legally or officially or whatever, she is able to take coyotes. I guess before she was told that she cannot, because I don't know if there are too many or what, but she is able to take in coyotes now.
And Susan, I strongly encourage you to contact me or have her contact me after the workshop, and I'm more than happy to further clarify and review the conditions of her MOU and just provide whatever service I can.
Okay, and I'll have your contact information.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, Vicki, would be super helpful if you could maybe in the chat function send out your contact information, your email address for folks.
I will do that right now.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Tally Caspi next. You may need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank all of you for putting this on. I'm an ecology PhD student at UC Davis, and I study urban coyotes in San Francisco. And I'm curious, I guess, from the standpoint of someone engaged in wildlife management, I guess, what do you see as like the biggest research needs or knowledge gaps for sort of developing coexistence strategies? And I would just be curious if you could speak to like the role that you think academic research should play in urban coyote management, if at all.
And who are you directing your question to?
Like Dr. Neem Quinn.
Dr. Quinn?
Well, Tally, obviously, I think research is very important in this. You're asking the wrong person here. I think you can't manage what you can't measure. And I really, really believe that. And I know that people get very frustrated when, it's just kind of study after study after study. But any scientist knows that, you know, you do one study and you answer one question, you get 10 more. That's just science and the way it is. And I understand that that's frustrating, but I think there's a need for like looking at adaptive management and how that works for urban wildlife. And I just don't think we have enough applied research out there. Obviously, all my work is very, very applied, but there's not enough people looking at applied research. And I think that while a lot of the basic biology is really, really important to understand and know, and we need that to move forward, we also need to move forward, and without actual looking at like either applied management or adaptive management and how that actually functions, we're just going to go around in circles over and over and over again.
This is Stafford. So I think Dr. Quinn hit the nail on the head, and that is, as a management agency, we need applied research. We need to understand tested principles, what works, what doesn't work, what is a waste of time. It's very clear that as we begin to navigate this landscape, people are seeking answers. And it's better to operate from a point of knowledge of that the research has shown things that work partially, things that work more thoroughly, or things that don't work at all. We don't have enough bandwidth to just be out there trying every little trick of the trade. It's got to be focused, and we got to be able to make progress for those conditions that that particular circumstance or geography or landscape is presenting us. And you know, California is the most diverse state in the nation, and it's not a cookie cutter. And what may work in the urban wildland interface around San Diego may not work in San Francisco. So I think that we're looking for assistance, and the applied research really helps target it. So well done on going out and researching coyotes in San Francisco, because we don't have a lot of answers, and hopefully you can help us get there.
Well, thank you both so much.
And Cynthia, before we move on to the next person, Dr. Quinn, we did have several people ask about coyotes mating with domestic dogs. And I don't know if that's Dr. Quinn or Heron, but I think it's Dr. Quinn.
Yeah.
Will they mate with domestic dogs?
Generally, they can't. Generally, species can't intermingle. And what happens when they do successfully do so is they generally produce sterile young. So, I mean, I don't know of any instances where it's happened with the domestic dog. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. I just don't want some sort of hybrid other carnivore causing trouble in Southern California. We definitely have enough problems already.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, we have Christy Bosley, followed by Isabel Calderon.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi. I live in Lakewood, Long Beach area in Southern California. And I just have a comment. Our coyote situation has gotten so bad that we literally have 4 to 5 pets a day showing up missing or showing up, half eaten in our yards, and, stuff I don't want my children to see. And with that, also, the coyotes are now running around at 3:30 in the afternoon. They're seen all times of day. And it's getting to where I don't really feel comfortable. Even if my kids are playing outside, I have young ones, little toddlers running around, and I really don't want them outside. And I know that, is it true that they see little kids as prey, as a food source? And I mean, I guess that's all what I want to say is just, I would just really like to see something be done about, I hate seeing my neighbors, crying and upset because their pets are gone. And it's not irresponsible pet owners. It's them taking, letting their dogs out in their backyard to go to the bathroom, whatnot. And they're still managing to get a hold of the animals and killing them. And that's it.
Thank you, Christy. Did you want to say something, Vicki?
Yeah, Christy, I just want to say that we hear you and we're committed to helping you, at the community level, determine an adaptive management approach, a strategy that's effective and specific to your community's unique needs. So please, by all means, outreach us after this. Make sure you participate in workshop 2, outreach your local community leaders. I just wanted to let you know that we hear you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just an
is
FYI,
it-
Christy, we actually have a collared coyote in Lakewood also, so we'll get to know the coyotes of Lakewood fairly well for here shortly.
Okay, we have Isabel Calderon, and then we'll hear from Randy Feilish.
Hello, good morning. I wanted to make a statement. I have been advocating for a city to control the coyote problem since 2015. The city did trap after a woman walking a leash dog was attacked by 6 coyotes. They eventually dragged the dog away from the woman. I've also been reading studies by other doctors that specialize in coyotes, Dr. Tim and Dr. Baker. There's lots of information that could be gathered that can be used to make an effective coyote management plan. It's been almost a decade. Hundreds, if not thousands of pets have been injured. Now, dozens of people are getting, in summary, of getting bitten by coyotes. The Keep Me Wild program, I think, is very appropriate information to give to Boy Scouts, to people that are going to visit the wilderness for a few days or weeks. It's not appropriate for us, a community that has our homes established here. We cannot keep pets indoors, keep them indoors away from something that we enjoy. We cannot keep our pets outdoors while we're enjoying the outdoors. All of these ecology and studies are great. Coyote mating, coyote breeding, coyote birth rates, how long do they live? That's all great information, especially for ecologists, biologists, but we need a plan that's effective. I think that's a bit distracting, to be, and not in no disrespect to our biologists. They study many years, they continue to study, they're knowledgeable, intelligent. But what I'm asking for is for the department to step up and take responsibility for every community, for every plan. I hear that California is diverse. Fine, then make diverse plans appropriate for each community. This is, I'm getting frustrated, and I think I got one idea is that if CDFW cannot manage the coyote problem, then step aside. Maybe USDA can do the job. Every community, like the previous caller, is asking, pleading, suffering trauma, people losing pets, which some of us feel that they're part of our family. I'm an animal lover. I'm no way, I'm a vegetarian for that reason. I'm no way of someone that says kill, 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 but there has to be a plan that has to be put together after at least a decade of studying the coyotes over and over and over again. That's my statement. Thank you.
Isabel, thank you so much. I mean, you've just made a great sales pitch for workshop number 2, where we will be having a much more detailed conversation about management plans and what works and what doesn't work. I think some of what you're hearing today with regard to management is that we're not entirely clear yet. What are the most effective management tools? We have some ideas, and certainly, plans are being developed by local and regional governments to address these coyote human conflicts. But there's still a lot that we don't know. And as a result, we don't know that these plans are the most effective way for dealing with the problem. And so we need to do both, right? We need to move forward with what information we do have, what we do know, and develop plans. But then we also need to modify those over time as we learn more through the research and the science. Very much understand the need there. And today is really an opportunity to start that process of getting to additional understanding and development of additional management plans. And so part of also what we will hear this afternoon is about the legal framework within which we operate, meaning what is it that the commission and the department can and can't do with relation to human wildlife conflicts and specifically coyote management. And then we also are going to have a guest speaker who has a lot of experience at the local level and regional level, who will also be providing input on what is that context, that jurisdictional context for what we are currently able to do. So hang tight, stay tuned. We'll have more this afternoon. We're going to take just a couple more questions because we are going to take a quick break before we have our next set of speakers, give everyone an opportunity to take a little bio break. And so Cynthia, if we could continue with a couple more speakers.
Okay, we have Randy Feilish.
Hi, good morning. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning. This is Randy Feilish. I'm a volunteer and Southern California representative for Project Coyote. I'd like to reach out to the previous speakers who just spoke out, Christy Bosley and Isabel Calderon, and ask them to please reach out to us at projectcoyote.org. We can put them in touch with wildlife watch groups in their community that are headed up by Kent Smurl at California Fish and Wildlife. We can also get involved with their cities in creating and developing a coyote management plan that makes sense for their community, like we did for the city of Calabasas. And then on another note, I would just like to mention that there are some cities that have local ordinances against trapping, and people should really find out what their cities allow and not allow. For instance, there's a no trapping or shooting ordinance in the city of Indian Wells, California. Also in the city of Los Angeles, there is no coyote trapping allowed as well. So sometimes if you find out what the local ordinances are, that can dictate, your methods of coyote, coyote coexistence. But we're willing to help on all ends, and we're volunteers here at projectcoyote.org. Thank you.
Okay, we have Karina Domingo, followed by Denise Bulbul, and those are our last two, I believe.
Yeah, we'll need to take a break after those two.
Karina, you may need to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Karina Domingo and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the founder and director of the Cougar Conservancy. I just wanted to thank the commission and the department and all of the speakers today. You know, this is a very critical workshop, and I know that it takes a lot of time and careful thought behind the scenes to put together a program like this. And so I just wanted to express my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Karina.
you. Denise Bulbul, you are up next.
Thank you very much. And I also want to echo the great appreciation for the department holding this meeting. I have a two-part question. So number one, is diminished habitat contributing to coyotes going into more urban neighborhoods? Number one. And then number two is when you get a report of a coyote incident or issue, is a part of that investigation or documentation, does it include whether or not there's feeding of wildlife in the vicinity or neighborhood of deer or wild animals? Because we know that if people are feeding deer, that can attract coyotes, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to know those two things and find out what are the human potential remedies that could be implemented. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Denise. So your second question will get answered with the next panel with the next set panelists. The first question, do we have any of our former panelists who would like to try and answer that one?
Sure, I can take that one, Melissa. I'm not really sure exactly what you mean by diminished habitat, but I think that the urban environment is not a bad habitat for coyotes. And I think we can see that from the very, very small home ranges and also by looking at how they traverse the landscape so well. So I don't know if you mean like kind of habitat degradation in like our more natural resource areas maybe, but I think that it might be the other way around, where actually it's easier to get food in the urban environment, and the urban environment might even be a better habitat. And by better habitat, I mean a more preferred habitat for the urban coyotes.
Ease of access to food. Yeah, that's definitely contributing to the issue. Well, this has been really wonderful. A huge thank you to our first set of speakers, Dr. Alex Heron, Dr. Neve Quinn, and of course from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Vicki Monroe. Thank you for helping to answer all of the questions and providing such valuable information. That's really going to feed into later conversations about the development of management plans and how we actually address these issues directly. We are going to take a quick break. We're going to break here for about 15 minutes. So we'll come back at 11:15. It's 11 o'clock right now. So we'll come back at 11:15, gives you a 2-bio break, and we will continue with our next set of presentations and Q&A. Thank you so much.
Yes, I am here.
Excellent. And I just want to double check. Do we have Chris Stutz and Joe Davini?
Yes, indeed.
Joe is here also.
Excellent. All right. Well, if we are all ready to get started again, do we have Stafford and Nathaniel Arnold with us? Awesome. Thank you, Stafford. And do we have Nathaniel or Jan Ikimoto?
Yes, this is Nate. I'm here.
You're both, okay, excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much. And Nathaniel, just noting that there was a question for you in the chat function.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Thank you. Okay, well then we're going to go ahead and get started again. I did want to highlight, we've had a number of folks asking about whether this workshop is being recorded. And I want to say, yes, it is being recorded and it will be available sometime next week. If you check out our website, the same place where the workshop is listed, at the bottom of that list, there will appear a link that says video with instructions on how to access the video. So that's the place to find that. But yes, absolutely, this is being recorded. The next workshop will also be recorded so that you can access the information anytime after today, or if there are others who weren't able to attend, because I know a number of folks have people they'd like to share this information with. So we're going to move into our next set of presentations. And the first one is related to the relevant laws, regulations, and policies to coyote management and human-wildlife conflict. And we're grateful today we have with us Chris Stutz, who's from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Law Enforcement Division. He's a captain there. The department's law enforcement division is the state lead for wildlife conservation law enforcement and is dedicated to protecting California's natural resources and providing public safety. And so Chris has a presentation for us today, setting that context for us before we move into a more local regional perspective. Chris, take it away.
All right, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Commissioner Sklar, and thank you, members of the public, for joining us today. Give me a second to get this rolling. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Chris Stutz. I'm with the Law Enforcement Division, and I'll be talking about coyotes in the urban environment and setting what dictates and guides the department's activity and the Law Enforcement Division's structure for these type of situations related to the laws, regulations, and policies. The objective of my presentation today is to set the framework for California's diversity and to highlight why this is a complex and challenging situation to deal with. Governmental jurisdictions is a key component to successfully trying to handle public interest and deal with the circumstances of urban coyotes. So we'll talk a bit about that. And California's Department of Fish and Wildlife's role, what we do, and then the framework through the laws and the policies that dictate how we do it. And those play into the framework that the department has for setting the groundwork that allows local jurisdictions to handle these situations as well.
And Chris?
Yes.
Before you go to the next slide, just a quick question for you. Is there any way you can bring up the main slide that you're on as the primary window so it's a little bit larger for folks to see? Right now we're seeing the slide that you're presenting plus the next slide plus all of your controls at the bottom.
We're on the wrong one here. Okay, give me 1 second.
Sure, no worries. Just want to make sure it's large enough for folks to see everything.
Hey, Chris, it's under display settings for the presentation.
I think part of the problem is I have two screens. Let's see if I unplug one, if that'll force it to behave the way I want it to.
And Chris, go ahead and pull up the presentation again the way you had it. And then there's across the toolbar at the top under display settings, it's causing the split screen issue.
Okay.
There you go. Now click on presentation.
How's that?
Perfect.
Thank you, Chris.
Are you guys seeing the chat or is that off of there?
We are seeing this, the natural diversity.
Okay. Perfect. So California's natural diversity. California is one of the most diverse states in the nation. And compounding that is that we have the highest population of people in the nation. So I included this slide with this kind of graph of California and along with the various uniquities about California to set kind of a visual image for everybody to imagine this state that is 159,000 square miles now divided by 58 counties. Imagine all 58 counties have their own independent right to manage through their own independent governments set by the needs, desires, and beliefs and practices or of the individual constituents, the voting public of those counties. Now imagine 40 million people, all with varying opinions, split into those 58 counties. Now overlay that with California's natural diversity, 4,800 lakes and reservoirs, over 1,000 native fish and wildlife species. I think if you are like myself and that creates a visual for you, it allows you to see how this quickly becomes a complex and challenging situation where it's obvious that there will be some interface between humans and wildlife. So as we've heard today, and as we are all aware, mainly by the fact that we're here, we are interested in the fact that we know that we are seeing a greater human wildlife interaction, and we're seeing greater human wildlife conflict. I say those two things different because they are very different. The mere presence of wildlife in an urban area, while that may be unique to some and may seem peculiar, it actually is not odd and it is not abnormal. And it also is not a reason for alarm. And that's one of the most important things that I think I would like to talk about or emphasize today, is that a mere sighting or the mere presence of wildlife in an area where we as humans don't think they should be doesn't really cause a reason for it. Local agencies often are unfamiliar with CDF's role, CDFW, the department's role, and they look to us for response as well as the public does. We've heard that today through the questions and through the comments. And so I'm hoping today to close some of those confusions and try help explain what it is that the department does. I think the best way to try to frame up the types of human interactions is to define those. There were questions today from individuals trying to decipher when should there be alarm, when is there an issue. And so I've tried to give a definition through some of our internal documents that provide a framework for what these types of interactions look like. So a mere sighting is just that. It's an animal who has found itself into an area that is normally a human area. They've strayed outside of their normal animal area or animal habitat, even if that's just barely outside of the fringe, as it's called. If it's a wildlife corridor or a open space or a green belt along an urban area, it's the moment that transition between those two lines is where the human component becomes alarmed. But again, that's not necessarily a conflict. The next level from a sighting would be a depredation. And a depredation is when wildlife has come into human habitation, into human habitat areas, and has caused some type of property damage. We've heard a lot today that usually or oftenly or frequently that has to do with attacks or depredation on pets. The highest level of concern and the foremost concern of the department, specifically the law enforcement division, are interactions with the public that become public safety. This is when wildlife has demonstrated aggressive action resulting in physical contact with humans. This can be either through direct contact or exhibiting immediate threat to public health and safety, given a totality of circumstances. So based off of the means, the opportunity, the location, the type of behavior, the ability to cause a human conflict or a human contact, I should say. All those things are taken into account when we measure and we try to discern what is a public safety wildlife encounter. It is, like I said, CDFWs and particularly law enforcement divisions utmost concerned. The introduction at the beginning from Melissa for my presentation talked about public safety being one of the main concerns of the law enforcement division. And it is that is actually within our mission statement. So it's very, very much a concern of ours. And when we have these human contacts with wildlife, or there's a physical contact or a public safety issue, our law enforcement officers respond to those instances. I'll go back to the sighting and depredation, and I'll point out a sighting is not going to generate an automatic response from the department. There is ways through the wildlife incident reporting system that was talked about that that kind of information can be reported, and we do track and keep interest in that kind of information. But it's not, as we said, a conflict, and therefore we don't respond. Depredation, same way, that's more of a nuisance wildlife issue in many regards, and that doesn't necessarily also elicit a response from the department, or at least the law enforcement division. But public safety, that's the highest level of concern, and we do deal with those. So what is CDFW's role with local jurisdictions? First and foremost, as I was highlighting with the 58 counties, those are independent jurisdictions who have their own rights to govern. And those rights to govern, the state provides a legal framework, but you can't, with the diversity that was highlighted, you can't have a one size fits all for the diverse nature of California or the diverse people or the diverse opinions and concerns and desires of the people. That's what locally elected officials are for. And so the department provides, through its laws and policies, a legal framework to provide guidance for those local jurisdictions to empower themselves, for those communities to make the decisions for themselves in dealing with these issues. What is the department's role for human-wildlife interactions? Simply put, the department's main role when we talk about wildlife and humans interacting, we primarily are dealing with the human behavior, the human component of those interactions. Through our laws and our policies, the department oftenly structures how it is that humans can interact with wildlife, the things that they can legally do and the things they can't legally do. That includes take, which is the pursue, catch, capture, or kill. And that includes possession, seasons, methods, limits, things like that related to lawful hunting activities. Prohibitions include harassment. As you see in this picture, this is a gentleman who was knowingly and purposely feeding a wild coyote. And that's something that is not only illegal, but is of serious concern for the department if those kind of situations are. So I spoke earlier about the structures. And so briefly going through those last few slides, those were what the department does. And so the policies and the laws tend to be why we do these things. So the terrestrial predator policy of the Fish and Game Commission recognizes that terrestrial predators are all native wildlife species of the carnivora, and that native terrestrial predators are an integral part of California. What does that mean? It means that they have a key component in the ecosystem and that they have a purpose. And so we, through terrestrial policy and through the department's framework, we recognize that as an integral part of the ecosystem, they play an important role, and that they are something that we need to figure out a way to adapt with and to coexist. California State Wildlife Action Plan. Much of this was covered today, either through the other presentations or my presentation now, talking about the wildlife incident reporting system, the Keep Me Wild program that gives guidance and information to the public on education for coexisting and living within areas where wildlife occur, which is everywhere in the state. We advise local governments, commissions, and working groups regarding biological and technical, the science side of wildlife. And we serve as the lead state for managing human-wildlife conflicts, public safety issues, and depredation issues like we spoke of. Department's operations manual, public safety wildlife guidelines, talks again, this gives the framework for what I covered in an abbreviated version above, kind of gives a visual for the type of wildlife incidents or interactions, a sighting, a threat, or an attack. So California wildlife laws, these are the very foundations of how, particularly how the law enforcement division works, but also specifically with what the department does. So we have two types of laws that are relevant to California's wildlife. One is the California Fish and Game Code, which is created by the legislature. That is the framework for the authorities and the delegated powers to not only the commission, but also to the department to provide the legal framework and to create additional regulations. Oftentimes the Fish and Game Code is referred to as the what we'll do, and regulations that are adopted by the commission down here at the bottom, the Title 14, are the how we'll do it. So regulations are established by the commission and the department to implement, interpret, and make more specific the statutes in the Fish and Game Code. Reflecting back to the gentleman that was knowingly or intentionally feeding the coyote, here's the law that directly prohibits that, and it's classified as harassment. So harassment is defined as any intentional act which disrupts an animal's normal behavior pattern, which includes but is not limited to breeding, feeding, or sheltering. We've talked a bit today, and there were some questions about hazing and how hazing works and whether or not hazing can be done. If you see in the second part of this law section, this says this does not apply to a landowner or a tenant who drives or herds a bird or a mammal for the purpose of preventing damage to their property or public property, including aquaculture or agriculture crops. That's important because it provides a framework for people to haze and to otherwise create in these urban areas. Much of the rest of the laws, like I said, are framework. I'm going to do my best to get through as many as I can. The highlights are going to be underlined or bolded, and I'll breeze through them. They're very word heavy. The intention of my PowerPoint was to provide a resource for folks to go back and review. So important to know, anytime you're talking about how wildlife is handled, is to understand the classification that regulates or specifies what the animal is, the species, how it is classified. So coyotes are a non-game mammal, and the authority section for the department to regulate how they are dealt with says that they may only be taken under the authority of the section and or the code. So unlawful for any person to trap any non-game mammal for purpose of recreation or commerce in fur. That's a newer law. It's very important. So trapping is legal. We'll get to that in just a second, but not the commerce or recreation of fur.
And Chris?
Yes.
Just would like to highlight again for folks that you have a number of slides that identify different sections of Fish and Game Code and Title 14 Code of Regulations. There's quite a few of them. We are going to make this presentation available on the website so that you can access all of those materials, which will also be in addition to some code sections and regulations that are already posted under the Coyote Workshop item on the webpage. So a lot of information that's accessible and or will be accessible on the website. So as Chris very quickly runs through these, he's not going to spend a lot of time on them. That's okay. You're going to be able to come back to them.
All right. Yes, that's exactly. Thank you very much for that clarification. I'll breeze through these rather quickly. They're very word heavy. It's legal speak. It's not bells and whistles and fancy. It's kind of dry, but let's roll with it. So again, this is the regulation. So the commission and department adopted regulation for classifying coyotes as non-game. Following non-game mammals may be taken at any time of year in any manner. That includes coyotes. It's unlawful to offer, this was a question in the chat, it's unlawful to offer any prize or inducement as a reward for taking of non-game mammals in an individual contest, tournament, or derby. Depredation, this is probably one of the more interested slides or sections to talk about, at least in this setting. Depredation law is in response to wildlife that has created a property damage or hazard like we spoke about earlier. So non-game mammals found to be injuring property may be taken at any time or in any manner by the owner or tenant or an agent, which includes federal, county, or city officers or employees when acting in their official capacity. So this section is important because it gives the framework for local municipalities and even the federal to do their duty to deal with depredation animals. As highlighted, it exempts section 3007, which is the requirement to have a license, a hunting license essentially. Overview of that section, just to highlight the key points: taken at any time in any manner, taken without a hunting license, except if someone is trapping for a service fee, taken by one, the owner or tenant, to the agent, employees acting in official capacities to include cities and counties, trapping of non-game mammals is allowed without a trapping license, except if trapping is done for service. Traps shall bear an identifying mark in the manner specified by the department, and traps must be inspected and animals removed daily by either the person who set the trap, landowner where the trap is set, or an agent of either. It's important to note at this point, it says inspected and animals removed daily. In trapping, an animal is not to be relocated or moved. We don't do that. That's illegal. The animal, covered in another section coming up, shall, upon inspection, either be killed or set free. So in conclusion, just to wrap this into something that would resonate with this group, under state law, under the depredation law, a person does not need a hunting license to take a coyote that has damaged their property, nor do they need to apply for a depredation permit to remove a coyote that injured or killed their pets or livestock. However, before taking any action, especially with the firearm, it's very important that the public understands that their respective city or county can have local jurisdictions that apply to discharge of firearms, setting of traps, and things like that. Other than depredation take, which is essentially hunting laws. So for hunting laws purposes, again, it's really important. Non-game species, as coyote is defined, can be taken year-round in any number, at any hour, day or night, with a few geographical exceptions, in any manner except by poison. Poison was a question that was also in the chat today. Poison is not illegal. It is not legal. It is illegal. Cannot be taken with use of bait. And there are certain trap restrictions. Again, another question in the Q&A today was talking about leg hold traps. With few exceptions, are leg hold traps allowed? And those sections deal with depredation, and usually higher level depredation, more along the lines of public safety, in which case the leg hold traps are allowed. They can be taken with use of an aid of electronic calls, directional lights, with some exceptions, with the firearm, but must have are the last really important ones. It's unlawful to trespass, to enter upon the land belonging to another, to discharge a firearm, or destroy a mammal or bird. Land of another is defined as under cultivation, that is fenced, or that has signs prohibiting somebody from going upon it. It's unsafe discharge of a firearm. It's illegal to discharge or to hunt within what is considered a safety zone with a deadly weapon, and that safety zone is considered 150 yards of any occupied dwelling belonging to another without the explicit permission of that person. And it's illegal. I mentioned this section because in rural areas, it's not uncommon that people hunt coyotes, both with the previous slide, which was the trespass, and from a road. So it's important to know it's illegal to discharge a firearm or release an arrow or crossbow bolt across any public roadway, including there's other sections to dealing with discharge from a motor vehicle, etc. Very important in this realm because we have such a diverse opinion on the subject of coyotes. It's very important to know that it's also unlawful to interfere with anybody who is lawfully participating in the take of animals. So to highlight, to say that again, a person shall not willfully interfere with the participation of any individual in the lawful activity of shooting, hunting, fishing, etc., trapping to be included, by either prohibiting, interfering with access to an area, interfering with the traps, causing noises or other diversions or distractions to frighten animals away. Those are all prohibited. Possession of non-game animals, that's just for reference if anybody's interested. The hours, this was already discussed. That's just the authority section. Methods was discussed. See if there's anything additional. Trapping laws. Trapping laws are very complex and comprehensive. Extensive trapping license process goes into becoming lawful to trap. aside from that depredation trapping section we talked about. And the documents, the meeting materials for this meeting, I included a link to trapping laws. Within that link, the laws covered in that document, I think it's a 19-page document, covers a lot of information about non-game species in general, and then the details about trapping laws. I'll briefly roll through these as the disclaimer talks about. Some of these are abbreviated, so don't take these to heart, but it does have the relevant code section for the full language.
And Chris, we will need to make it really fast because Joe has to leave for another presentation.
Okay. There's just another section regarding disturbing a trap set by somebody lawfully. Don't do it. Trapping license is required with the exception of depredation. Officers of local jurisdictions, there's another authority section for that. There's the section failing to visit or remove traps, which was talked about. One section that's relevant here is it was asked about what do I do if I suspect somebody is unlawfully trapping? So when a conibear trap is set on public land or land expressly open to the public, it's required that danger signs be posted. That's an important section or a relevant section maybe to somebody. And that's it, we're wrapped up. So if anybody is interested in the real nuts and bolts about trapping, this section 46.5.5 is a huge one. This is only excerpts of it, a very limited excerpt of it. I recommend going to either the document that was provided or down here in the, this is a hyperlink for DFW 1389. That's the form I referred to that has all the information. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. I think hopefully it's obvious to folks that the laws and regulations that dictate how, when, and where we manage wildlife and specifically coyotes in the urban environment is very complex. And there are definitely limitations to what can be done. And so to roll into the next presentation, we will do a Q&A immediately following the two presentations. And so if you have questions that you want to ask of either presenter, please do add them to the Q&A. Rebecca's doing her best to try and answer questions as she can, but some of them will be directed to Chris or Joe directly. So our next speaker is Joe Davini, who has a degree in biological sciences from California State University of Hayward. He started his agricultural career with Contra Costa County in 1988 as a pest detection and noxious weed specialist. From 1990 to 2012, he was an agricultural biologist and worked in all programs of the Agricultural Commissioner's Office. And he has since been the Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures for Santa Clara County since 2012. He has a passion for science and enjoys biology, entomology, botany, agriculture, land use, and environmental topics. A big thank you, Joe, for being with us today. You have a lot of experience in this area. We appreciate you joining us and providing a local/regional perspective.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Am I coming through okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. You know, I am going to go very fast. I have to give some other presentations this afternoon, so I apologize for that in advance. But Chris actually touched on a lot of things that that kind of ring true with me. But yeah, this is a Santa Clara perspective. And we have just like Chris said, there's 58 counties and they're all different. So they vary. Some have what's called the Wildlife Services contract, and Santa Clara does not have that. I used to work for Contra Costa, they had it. So without having that, it's interesting where the different agencies that deal with animals or the different officials that get involved with animals, that sort of thing, we're all trying to serve the community and what's the best for the community, and there's of course funding. So last year, a lot of coyote calls were coming in, and I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but it's strange. It's not strange. It makes sense. When you Google something, it just depends on how you put it in there, who you're going to get. So if you type in wildlife problems, or if you type in a coyote sighting, or if you type in animal control or how to deal with an aggressive coyote, you'll get all kinds of things. So actually, one of the first things that gets hit at our county is vector control. So vector control as a part of their operations. They do wonderful work. They cover everything from bats to rats to coyotes, but they're extremely limited on what they can do. Matter of fact, for coyotes, the topic of today, all that they can really do is educate. Educate on habitat modification, don't feed them, all the things that most of you know already, but we still have trouble messaging out to everybody. And there's oftentimes citizens who are very concerned and very worried and very sad or very upset. So it's really difficult for vector control to handle all these calls. So it came up in conversation, and I knew a little bit about it because some counties, there's contracts with the ag commissioner, or the ag commissioner plays a more active role. But that's not the case in Santa Clara. So I brought in animal care and control from the county, who covers unincorporated. Just like Chris was saying, the county has certain things they can do. And then the city of San Jose, Chris's slide, 40 million people in California, 1 million of them are in San Jose. So you got a lot of population there surrounded by urban and rural areas. So we also have Fish and Game. They have a warden that can do certain things. I was blessed last year to actually, the UC Cooperative Extension hired a human wildlife interaction advisor. So we have yet another person who can help. And Vector Control has their wonderful messaging. And it's interesting, there's an animal rescue there, and then parks. These are all basically my colleagues, just people who I officially work with or have some sort of relationship with. So we started to talk a little bit. All I can do is educate or help, maybe direct. The county animal control, that covers unincorporated. They are very limited. They are really almost all designed for dogs and cats, and about the only thing they could do is maybe if there's a sick or injured coyote, take that to a place that we have an agreement with. The wildlife services, sometimes people call them directly, sometimes different angles to get there, but we don't have a contract. And then, like I said, the Fish and Game folks, they have their specialty, but they're stretched thin and have a lot on their plates, huge regions. So we have our specialist who can also help messaging, but doesn't have any true actions, but can help inform on laws and things. So just as Chris said, we've been kind of like spinning around a little bit to find out what's the best foot forward, and we're trying to take into considerations when things happen. We've had a few incidents that happened, so we kind of talk about it. I won't go too deep into this slide because I've mentioned it, and so did Chris. But I think one of the bottom lines we'd like to do is take care of our citizens, and how they vary a great deal. Some of them are feeding them, just like that picture Chris showed. And some of them are scared to death of them, and it's all about education. And really, I love that word coexist. So, but anyway, when you're dealing with these different people who have engaged in different ways, it's sometimes trying to resolve it at the proper level. Some want to jump to a higher level, and it's really important to just try to educate them and have a consistent message. So then when they hear it, maybe from one or two or three different agencies, and we're all kind of understanding our own limitations and what we can do, then it helps. So Vector Control, they can do everything about bats. They'll respond to every rabies call for bats. They do mosquitoes all the time, and they can educate. But they often can't handle something if the person is really having more issues or repetitive issues. So then we try to move it up. This is not a real flow chart that we have written. That there's just, we can't really do that, but we're trying to work together to solve things at a lowest level to where we can coexist. But anyway, the human wildlife folks can come in and they reinforce the same messaging. You know, don't feed, don't, you know, you can do different things that will hopefully lessen your interactions. And then, but if it does get to a higher level, then we do have like the fish and wildlife folks that they can explain, just like Chris did, that there are lots of limitations on the laws about what people can and can't do. And then the fourth level, depending upon what has happened or what is occurring, then some of the different agencies do work with the local police departments. And then there's sometimes like is a need to consult with wildlife services. One thing that came up is, you know, is there a trend? Is there more? What kind of data do we have? What are how are these data recorded? And if there's different nuances in how the different agencies record things. And a lot of it depends upon money and resources. So I was just going to show Vector because they happen to have, because they deal with so many service calls for mosquitoes or for bats or for rats or different things that vector control works with. They have a really neat system. So it just gets plugged into the system, date, time, location, species, and activity. And then they have also some spots on there about what we can record. So this just shows Santa Clara County and all the calls that we had since 2015. And you can see there is a trend up. So that's another reason why we thought to get together to talk more. We had a recent situation. It's just as Chris was saying, somebody was feeding them. There was fires on the east side, and there was lots of people who were working over there in that fire area and the fire recovery and that sort of thing. So I think the coyotes were being fed. That's the word on the street. So the coyotes became very comfortable approaching cars. But this was actually a park property, and it was a county road. And then the coyotes were coming up forward, so our flow chart didn't really work. So we had to kind of shift gears. It wasn't a citizen calling. It was actually something that was taking place on county property there. So we're just kind of working on that one. The city of San Jose, actually the best thing I think we did there was lots of signage saying, don't feed, don't feed, don't feed. That went up on the sides of the road where it was taking place. Cities also, as Chris mentioned, have different jurisdictions and different things that they can do. They're working on creating a coyote management coexistence plan. They're having sightings, and if it's just a sighting, they forward it to vector control, who kind of starts our process there. But they also work with their police department, and then they have some other options sometimes too, depending upon the situation. So anyway, we just put this ad hoc committee together just for us people who get the calls to meet as needed or as often as needed, try to find out who's handling what and who's the best person to respond to certain things. And then if it does show a lot of activity, then we might be able to hire more people or do something. We're not there yet, but we thought it was important to have a consistent message that we're all sharing when the different people call the different agencies. So I think that was my last slide, and I am 11:59. I have to leave at 12, so that's my end of my show. I'll stop sharing screen. Sorry I rushed so fast, and I apologize for having to leave.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, very much. I appreciate your presentation and sharing some of that experience. I'm sorry to hear that you won't be able to stay for the Q&A because I suspect that there'll be a lot of questions related to your experience at the local or regional level. Perhaps if you are available, we would love to have you join us for the next workshop, which will be mid-May, where we'll be talking about the application of some of this information that we're learning today to developing those local or regional management plans.
That sounds good. Please invite me. I would look forward to it and learning more. And I wish I could stay longer. It just is, my day is stacked with several meetings. I apologize for that.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us. Appreciate it. And
Okay.
we will be in touch again soon. All right. So we are, now that we've finished the two presentations, we are going to move into a Q&A. I think everyone on the line is, or on in the workshop is familiar with the Q&A that we've been using. So please do keep using that. And a big thank you to Rebecca, who has been assisting us with the Q&A and getting questions answered that aren't specific to the presenters. Chris, are you still on? I think we still have Chris.
I'm here.
Dudes, there he is. Excellent. All right. So
I was giving my 7-year-old a chance to run out of the room.
No worries. We definitely understand a lot of folks living in that world right now. So we do still have Chris with us. Thank you. And I do believe that we also still have Vicki Monroe with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who can assist us with some of these questions as well, related to roles and responsibilities, jurisdiction, given Vicki's experience, especially, you know, some of the local and regional perspective as well. And so let's start with, there was a question here related to, and this is going to be for Chris. This had to do with section 4152 of California Fish and Game Code. And there were a couple of questions. One specifically is asking, is someone allowed, if a coyote is exhibiting threatening behavior in a yard or say on a sidewalk or a street or et cetera, does 4152 allow someone to shoot a coyote?
So unfortunately, most of the legal questions, we get this all the time. If folks are not familiar with it, I encourage people to look at it. The department has a weekly Q&A column that we've done for decades. Many of the questions cover coyote topics, but one of the most common things that happens when you try to get into the Q&A on specific laws is it depends, because there's so many factors. So it would depend on where you are. If you're in a local municipality or jurisdiction that otherwise prohibits the possession maybe, or even at the very least the discharge of a firearm, then the answer from a fish and game perspective, the 4152, we talked about how that allows for the killing of a coyote with the use of a firearm, but all those other things come into play and have a factor. Again, the 150 yards from an occupied dwelling is a huge hurdle as well. So urban areas, it generally doesn't work.
And just to clarify, in urban areas, it generally doesn't work because there are local laws or ordinances that prohibit the discharge of a firearm in an urban environment, or as you say, state law prohibits within 150 yards of a structure.
Yes.
Okay. Someone had a question here. I think he said, I think, correct me if I heard it wrong, but is coyote trapping not allowed in Los Angeles?
That would be a Los Angeles question. So the most important thing for my presentation that we need to highlight is when you get into this urban environment, the finite nuts and bolts is determined by the local jurisdiction and the people that are elected by the constituent base of those areas. And so the framework, the legal sections that I provided, those are state laws that provide a groundwork for those municipalities to develop their laws. But ultimately, the way governmental structure works, local municipalities can have laws that are more restrictive.
And I'd like to add on to that too, to clarify. There's the City of Los Angeles and then there's the County of Los Angeles. And those are different jurisdictional authorities. So for instance, the city of Los Angeles, they have, they have City of LA Animal Services folks and a couple of wildlife officers who are dedicated to responding to wildlife calls. And, the provisions that allow or prohibit trapping in the city of LA is different from the County of LA. So it's really critical, just hitting home on what Chris said is please, if know where you live, know what jurisdictional authority will guide the framework in which you can operate.
Great tips from both of you. Thank you. I have a question here. It's multiple parts. So I'm going to start with the first one because they're each a little different. Does California Department of Fish and Wildlife want road-killed coyote carcasses brought in for data collection purposes?
So I'll take the first part of that one. We always recommend, if you see something unusual, so if there's something unusual about the carcass, some sign of possibly a disease process, or just something seems unusual, by all means, please contact your regional office of our department, and then you can report what you're seeing. We do have a mortality reporting database as well, so you can report that to the Wildlife Investigations Laboratory through our branch. Generally though, short answer, no, we do not typically collect or receive coyote carcasses.
And I just saw Stafford and Stott both come on video. Did you want to add to that?
I think that Vicki answered. I mean, generally, no, we don't need the carcass unless there's something unusual.
Another method, and it's becoming a larger citizen science reporting database, is the UC Davis roadkill application, where citizens can report the roadkill, and frankly, that database is really starting to help understand concentrated areas of animal activity related to transportation infrastructure. So that citizen science is also another layer for the public to report it. But yeah, I think our bandwidth and capacity to handle necropsies of roadkill is not there. So.
Great, thank you for that. And there's a number of questions related to the lethal removal of coyotes. And obviously we've had a number of incidents recently that have been very public. Folks are wondering, how is it that a specific problem coyote is identified? When there's this need to lethally remove a coyote, what does that look like? What is that process, and how is that done?
So I'm happy to take the first part of that question, and then Scott or Chris, if you wanted to add on to that. So typically that identification is done through the necropsy process. And then obviously if it's a public safety wildlife, in particular, a predator, we have to test for any sort of disease processes that might be occurring, including rabies. The only way to test for rabies is to take 2 portions of the brain. And so that has to occur once the animal is deceased.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, and a lot of this is kind of an enforcement response. It depends on the severity of the issue, and we've got techniques that would allow us to identify a specific animal if we needed to do that.
I'm sorry, what was the last part of that response?
And maybe I'll kick it over. I think our Deputy Chief Arnold wants to respond to this, and it's probably better because it's largely law enforcement response. So thanks.
I thank you, Scott and Vicki. Yeah, so and I'll really focus on public safety attacks where, say, a coyote has bit a human. What we try to do is we try to get to the victim as soon as possible in order to collect clothing, blood samples, any type of evidence that we can get, that then goes to our forensic lab to be able to start a profile on a particular coyote that we will then look for.
And so related questions folks are asking then are the ones that don't match the DNA, right? So obviously you're looking to match DNA for the coyote who is the offender, and wanting to know, so what happens if it's not the right right coyote, the DNA doesn't match, are they released back into the wild? And I think if I'm understanding correctly, they can't be released back into the wild because you have to kill the coyote, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not like when we have other attacks on animals like mountain lions or bears, where they can go into larger traps to where we do try to release the non-offending animal. Coyotes are different. So we are getting better. We're very thoughtful about our methodology, how we, place out traps, how we, look at different methods to do that. So we try and minimize the best we can during the process to really target the offending animal.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a tough job. Okay. So that then ties into one of our, and similar to what we did with the first round of focused discussion questions and the Q&A, a lot of the Q&A are asking similar questions to what's in the focused discussion list of questions. So I'm gonna merge them together. And so I think you covered this a little bit, Chris, in your presentation, but in case folks missed it, one of the questions is about trapping and releasing a coyote elsewhere. Is it legal to trap the coyote either themselves or to hire someone? How does that work? And then can that coyote be released elsewhere?
So based off of the department's state laws, the framework that allows for trapping, again, in a it depends situation, taking into account trapping has some restrictions on urban environments, and then if it's not directly a depredation issue, you have the licensing requirement. Licensing for trapping requires testing and a series of events that a person needs to go through to become licensed. So it's complex if it's not a clear cut and dry depredation issue, and you have the local municipality confines and constrictions as well. So it depends, and that's the unfortunate answer a lot of times when you talk about laws, because unless somebody's going to spell out every single part, I live at this address in this municipality, it becomes hard to answer the question specifically. But to the other part of the question about relocation. Relocation is a non-option. It does not fix anything. It transfers a problem to a different area. It's dangerous for the person who's trying to handle a live animal. It's a non-starter. It's illegal, and it's nothing to consider. If it gets to the point where people are trapping or utilizing a trapper and all those things are legal, the animal will be dispatched or released where it was trapped.
And again, that's consistent with state law, the requirements there. Yeah. And so this is related to that. And I know that we don't have the answer to this, but I want to put it out there, realize we recognize it. And I'm not sure what the solution is, but maybe someone in this group has one. But as you just described, trap and remove, meaning take it somewhere else, is not an option, legally not an option. And yet there are, the person's commenting, there are many companies who advertise that they trap and remove animals. And it's only, by happenstance that sometimes they learn that in fact, no, the animal was not moved elsewhere, but in fact is euthanized. And for some people, that's very upsetting. And so folks are just wondering, what can we do? Is there anything we can do to force more truth in advertising when it comes to some of these pest control and trapping organizations?
truth in advertising I don't have an answer for, but we've provided what the law says. And so I think it's no different than when people use softer words like passed away or gone to another place. Remove means remove from existence. It means that the animal will be killed.
And adding on to what Chris just said, I would say that, the onus is at least partially on the property owner to make sure they know what service they're paying for. And so they should ask those questions. What does removal mean? Where is the animal being removed to? What's the removal process? So.
Great. I noticed Ari Kornman, our wildlife advisor, also just joined us by video.
Yeah, thank you. I just I'm not going to weigh in on the legality of it, but I wanted to address from a biological point of view when it comes to translocation. Just putting legalities aside, it's biologically problematic as well. That you get questions of moving diseases around, and you could inadvertently be moving diseases into areas that don't have them. And a lot of studies that have tracked translocated animals, and this goes beyond just coyotes, but also for coyotes, just don't show good survivorship of the animals that are moved. They just don't survive very long. They're in unfamiliar habitat. Often there are resident animals that are there that the new animal that's translocated will be perceived as an aggressor or, impeding on their territory and are persecuted by some of the other animals that are there. So also from a biological perspective, translocation is often very problematic.
Great. Thank you, Ari. All right. So another question here. I think this, I'm not sure if this is for Chris or for Vicki, but someone says, they're walking down the street, they're walking their dog, and they see a coyote as they're walking down the street. The coyote may have even looked at them and snarled a little bit, and then keeps moving on. What should they do? Is there someone they should contact?
I can take that. I think Chris kind of hit it home that a sighting in and of itself, while possibly unusual or unexpected to some people in urban environments, it doesn't constitute a conflict, perceived or actual, or an emergency, just by occurring. So that coyote existing and being seen isn't a conflict. I would say, though, that for tracking and reporting purposes, depending on which local community you're in, you may have, a coyote reporting hotline, depending on if there's already a regional or community level coyote management plan in place. We also have our statewide wildlife incident reporting system, which there is the option of just reporting something as a sighting. But typically, if you've just seen a coyote while you're walking and it moves on, it is in and of itself exhibiting normal, healthy behaviors.
Great. All right. And then what do they do if, in fact, they encounter or they see near them an aggressive coyote that is, in fact, approaching, growling, snarling, attempting to bite, those sorts of things?
Maybe I'll add to that, Vicki, give you a break on this. I think it really just builds on what Vicki just said, and that is, I think there's often a perception that there's aggressive behavior in a coyote that is not necessarily aggressive. I mean, if there's truly a public safety concern, then you could contact any public safety officer. But I think it's often an issue of perception. If a coyote comes, say, on a trail or something like that, and stands at a distance that you perceive as being safe, or the coyote perceives as being safe, and kind of shows a little bit of coyote behavior, that's not necessarily a threat to you.
But for those that are a threat.
Well, if it's a threat, if it's a true,
that's when you call 911.
Yeah, if it's a true threat, then you reach out to whatever law enforcement, you could reach out to. I mean, obviously the department would be the, have the greatest expertise in that space, but I mean, yes, you would.
Call 911. Building off of what Scott said.
I think I'm kind of taking, I mean, I hear you in terms of answering the question, but I just want to offer up here that I think there are often, not denying that, sometimes there are aggressive events, but often they're more perceived aggressive events than they actually are aggressive. I would just put that in your mind as well.
Great. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. All right. And then Chris, I think already alluded to this in his presentation, question about feeding coyotes, obviously not legal and obviously should not be done, correct?
Correct. No feeding of any wildlife. The intentional feeding is what that law spoke to. So a lot of people get concerned and confused about, is food left on my porch feeding coyotes? Coyotes will likely eat it. It's a practice and behavior that should be discouraged and shouldn't be occurring. Is that fit within the framework of illegally feeding? Maybe, maybe not, probably not, but it's a practice that should be discouraged. The example that I provided was the gentleman who was knowingly and deliberately feeding the wildlife, which is explicitly prohibited.
Great, thank you. And then if someone suspects that someone is illegally taking coyotes, who should they contact?
Well, you could contact your local Fish and Wildlife office to report anytime you suspect that there's illegal hunting activity or unlawful take activity, along with our CalTIP line or our TIP 411 line. Both of those numbers can be found through the homepage of our department, or I could add them in the chat here in a moment. It's
great. Okay, thank you. Taking a slightly different twist, let's say someone encounters what appears to be a sick, an injured, or perhaps an orphaned coyote. What should they do in that situation?
So I can take that one. If it's a sick, injured, or orphaned coyote, I would definitely start with their local animal services division to see what resources are, well, I'm sorry. If it's a sick coyote, if it's injured, you can definitely and you should call our regional biologist, so that way you can receive resources, including who might be a local permitted wildlife rehabilitation facility, authorized and with the capacity to take in a coyote. So there's a couple of options, but definitely start with local resources and include our department.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I know that we spoke a little bit about this morning. We have someone following up on the idea of being out and about in your local community. I'm in a park, I'm on a city street, I'm at the end of a cul-de-sac, and there's a coyote that is approaching me and my dog, or me and my child, or whatever the case may be. What can I do in that moment to scare that coyote away?
I can take that one if that's helpful. So we went over in the first part of the workshop, this concept of hazing. So in that moment, certainly utilizing some common hazing tactics to try and attempt to scare or deter that coyote. So implementing some negative adversive conditioning techniques. You can wave your arms, stomp, throw something towards the coyote. Really, it comes down to behavior and how you can influence the behavior of that animal in the moment. So it's important to remember that they all are a small dog, essentially, or a medium-sized dog. So they understand territoriality and territorial responses, and how aggression works, and how to stand down if they need to, typically.
Great. Thank you. Great reminder from this morning, earlier this morning. So for those folks who are aware perhaps of people who are illegally feeding wildlife, where should they report that?
That would be the Cal Tip line again, or the Tip 411. Those would be your best resources. So what those programs are is they're ran through our dispatch center, and it gets the information provided by the reporting party to the appropriate wildlife officer or wildlife officer district. And follow-up investigations of reports can be handled that way.
Okay. Speaking of investigative reports, one of the questions was related to when you do have a coyote issue or a situation that the department is responding to, or say local law enforcement, is part of that investigation looking into perhaps what is attracting the coyote to the area, or is it limited to the public safety issue?
In regards to an investigation of a feeding, is that what you described?
No, just in regard to if an investigation is being conducted about a public safety incident, is part of that investigation also looking at maybe what's attracting the animal to that area, or is it focused on the investigation of the event itself?
So law enforcement's role in regards to a public safety issue is going to be the safety of the public. So that's going to be the primary focus. Now, in dealing with a public safety event, especially one that involves a contact of a wildlife with a person, it's going to be a comprehensive approach. There would be multiple people aside from just the Fish and Wildlife law enforcement officers responding. And so those issues or those concerns may be discovered and may be addressed at some point by this comprehensive core group of folks that would show up to these issues, but that wouldn't be the primary focus of responding wildlife officers. Public safety would be the utmost concern and would be the most important thing that would be dealt with first.
And adding on to Chris's really excellent response, if the local jurisdiction or that community outreached us as a department, we have limited resources, but we're very much so committed to helping address and reduce human wildlife conflicts. So we do have many examples in which a public safety event has occurred, and then in response to that, a community wants to identify and address the potentially larger issue. So within that context and that scope, we are able to provide technical assistance and guidance, but that would be the wildlife biologists. So the wildlife officers, they are dedicated officers focused on public safety and that component of things. But on the wildlife management side, we do provide assistance.
Great. And that's actually a really important tie-in to our next workshop, because one of the things we will be talking about is what is it that local jurisdictions can do to help address these issues, including developing a coyote management plan. And so we'll be talking about that in more detail. And a lot of the folks who are participating in today's workshop, as far as presenters and answering questions, will be part of that workshop as well. But that's going to be an important opportunity to also further engage, because Vicki, as you described, the department already does engage with a lot of local jurisdictions to help provide that technical assistance for what are the sorts of things they can be doing, how do they develop their own management plan, et cetera. So hopefully the workshop in May, we can attract a larger number of those local community representatives to participate and learn a bit more about what it is they can be doing at the local level to help their residents address this issue. So great. Well, listen, it is about 12:30, and so we wanted to take some time for general public comment and general public questions. I think we've covered a lot of the questions so far. And so for folks who are participating on the public side, if you would like to ask a question or provide a public comment, please do raise your hand using the Zoom function. if you are on the phone, and I know we do still have a few folks on the phone, and you want to raise your hand, you can do that by pressing *9. Please only do that one time, because if you do it twice, you will take yourself out of the queue. So if you're on the phone, press *9 to add yourself to the list of speakers. And so Cynthia, if you want to go ahead and get us started on public comment and question.
Sure. We will have Deborah Martin first, and you will need to unmute yourself, and then she'll be followed by Stephen Childs.
Well, I'm sorry, I must have raised my hand by accident. Please disregard.
Oh, okay. I will.
Thank you for your honesty, Deborah.
Then we will hear from Stephen. And you will need to unmute yourself.
And Stephen will be followed by Rebecca Dimitrick.
Yes.
Okay, so I had a question. The public is told that unintentional and intentional feeding may lead to habituation. I want to know if animal rehabbers are allowed to feed coyotes food in the field to treat them for mange. I looked in the code and I couldn't find any exemptions for this.
I'm sorry, could you clarify your question? Are rehabbers allowed to feed coyotes in the wild?
Correct.
And I believe I can answer this for Captain Stutes, but I think he said it's illegal to feed wildlife in the wild.
Can Stutes give clarification to that, and possibly Vicki Monroe?
I mean, I think Vicki and Chris can clarify if a coyote is injured and is in a rehab facility, that would be different than in the wild.
Yeah, that falls under the laws that Chris was presenting to you earlier. In terms of it actually falls under the harassment of wildlife law, right, Chris?
Yes, I can't, again, I hate to defer to depends, but it sounded as though he was asking a question about something that I don't know all the details on.
He was asking whether or not the rehabbers are allowed to feed wildlife in the wild, to feed coyotes in the wild.
Generally speaking, no.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Chief Bess has directly responded to this question with Mr. Childs.
Okay.
We will hear from Rebecca Dimitrick now, and then that is all we have at this time.
Hi. Oh, good. I have a couple questions that weren't answered. One specifically for Chris on the trapping regulations. It just seemed to blow by a little bit, and these two things often get misinterpreted or not done. It's 465.5 G3, and I think it's F1. The marking of a trap, even if it's a homeowner, could you please clarify if somebody's setting a trap for wildlife, even if it's a homeowner, they must have that trap marked, even if it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife or USDA. We've been finding a lot of traps not marked. So could you please clarify that requirement, as well as the 150-yard rule that requires written consent from neighboring homeowners that are within 150 yards? Thank you. And I have a second question, so don't go anywhere.
That sounded like two questions.
Well, you can answer them on the, if that can be addressed now, since we have this large audience of people and this always comes up, that's why I put it out there in the questions, but if you could answer it now, that'd be fantastic.
I can answer the tagging in both depredation and lawful licensed trapping. The trap is supposed to, by law, have an identifier attached to it. The identifier varies in those two circumstances. So the identifier for a licensed trapper or a person not doing depredation trapping, the identifier is associated with their trapping license and a specific number issued by the department related to the traps of a licensed trapper not performing depredation. And essentially the trap marking for depredation or homeowner has, as you described, assuming depredation. That's the bad part, is assuming. So in those situations, if I understand your question completely, it needs to be identified whose trap it is in some way. And the point is to be able to identify that back to the person who put the trap there.
I believe that they're supposed to call the licensing branch if it's a property owner. They have to get the number, they have to call the licensing branch, like if Sally Howard's still there, and get a number from your licensing branch that registers that trap to them. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
you need to get a depredation number from our licensing branch.
Awesome, thanks. And then could you just talk on the 150-yard rule?
You need to have permission from all property owners or I believe tenants to trap within 150 yards of an occupied dwelling.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more hands. Isabel Calderon will be speaking first, and then Gary Ray Gray.
Okay, hi. I thought I missed it. I just have a quick question. I'd like to know from anyone that wants to respond, is there ever a situation where, aside from a human bite, do you ever recommend for trapping, for control of that coyote in a community? If there's multiple pets, coyotes in school grounds, that type of escalating aggressive behavior. Thank you.
So I'm happy to help respond to
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I entirely understood the question.
Yeah. So Isabel, that really, the level or scope or type of community response depends on the community. So if there's already an existing coyote management plan in place, they will have a detailed stepwise decision-making process as far as what constitutes a potential public safety threat or risk. And then obviously all within the framework that we provide on the state level with laws and regulations pursuant to those laws and regs. So, we strongly encourage you to participate in the next workshop, and please don't hesitate to outreach me, any of us on this panel after this. And we can get more into specifics in regards to if you have specific examples that are going on in your community.
Thanks for that, Vicki. So I think that's a really important, again, setting the stage for our next workshop where we start talking about the specifics of what works, what doesn't work, what local communities can do as far as developing a plan, et cetera. And so would hope that perhaps Isabel could join us for that next workshop.
Okay, we have Gary Ray Gray and then Fauna Tomlinson.
I perused the trapping regulations and I agree they are very, very, very complex. And I was getting quite confused. So maybe you can clarify something for me. As I understand it, if you want to trap for predation, you don't have to have a permit. But it's illegal to trap for commercial purposes. So why do people trap coyotes if it's not for predation and it's not for commercial purposes? What reason are traps being used for coyotes? And as I recall, there were a lot of other animals in those regulations that situation was allowing for.
Yeah, you cannot trap for the purposes of commerce and fur. So there's no, what is sometimes referred to as recreational, if you will, trapping. So all trapping would be for depredation.
So So recreational trapping is illegal.
Is illegal, and that was a statewide law enacted and I think went into effect January 1 to 2020.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it specifically says for the purposes of commerce and for, so it really makes the only trapping that's allowed is for depredation.
We have Fauna Tomlinson and then Adriana Alvarez. Fauna, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, got it. Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So if you can only trap for depredation, what if there's no depredation and there's no confirmed property damage? So you just don't want wildlife near you, you have some fears, you put it out there, you ask the trapper to take it away, but does there have to be a confirmed reason to hire a trapper? Does it have to confirm take a pet or do damage or have depredation is my question.
Well, you would be,
I just want to confirm, Fauna, if is your question, then I want to hire, a pest control company to come in and trap this animal that's been coming into my yard.
Right. Does it have to have a reason? Does it have to be a nuisance animal in order to do that? And, or can I just do it? Hire him.
no, you would be trapping under 4152 that Chris presented earlier, which is essentially depredation.
So in different cities, if there's no depredation, there's no pets taken, there's no public safety issues, no attacks, and cities are still trapping, how is that legal?
Well,
by a licensed trapper, you can trap so long as it's not for commerce and fur.
All right, so it doesn't have to be for a reason. You can just trap. The animal does not have to be a nuisance. It didn't have to depredate. It didn't have to cause a problem.
In other words, what I think Fauna's trying to say is I'm hiring a pest control or wildlife services officer to come out and trap a skunk, a coyote, whatever. It's in my backyard. I don't want it there. I don't have to give them a reason for why that animal should go away.
So long as it's an animal that is legal to take under the law's structure for trapping, under licensed trapping, so long as it's legal under that, you can trap.
The company can trap.
Is it legal?
The licensed trapper can trap.
Yes.
A licensed trapper can trap with a license.
Is it legal for the licensed trapper to trap an animal that's not a nuisance?
That's again, the answer was they don't have to provide a reason. The homeowner or tenant can ask the licensed trapper to come and remove the animal, and they do not have to prove that there was aggression or any other rationale for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Adriana Alvarez, and then we have Rebecca Dimitrick again.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for putting this together for all of us. I am the example of a suburban wife, and I am very concerned about what happens in my neighborhood. We have a problem with mangy coyotes in the areas of Glendora and here in West Covina. We have called the Department of Wildlife, and we haven't gotten a straight answer. The animal control told us to call the rehabbers. My in-laws live in Alhambra, and I don't like what the rehabbers are doing there. I don't want them coming to my community and feeding chicken to the coyotes that are sick. In my opinion, these coyotes are very ill and they need to be taken out. I also have read that a mangy coyote can be a more aggressive coyote because when they're sick, they have different behaviors. If this is true, and if somebody can point out where is a good place to call to report these sick animals. Some of them look really bad. Thank you.
And if I remember correctly, Vicki, you had recommended a couple of options for sick or injured animals.
Yes, correct. And when it comes to the issue of wildlife with mange, in particular urban coyotes, it is extremely challenging. So Adriana, thank you for bringing forth those concerns. In your area, again, it would start with the local community. As we've indicated, if there's, as we help communities develop an integrated coyote management plan specific to those community needs, ideally it would address a scenario such as that. So in the absence of that, we recommend outreaching your local animal services division, seeing what resources are available for humane euthanasia in situations like that. Some counties have licensed trappers on staff, and that might be a situation in which they may be willing to respond. But again, it's dependent upon their resources and availability. And as a department, we don't have trappers on staff. But obviously, when those situations are occurring, please contact us. Make sure you're working with your local community leaders as well.
Okay.
We're
I'm
going to
sorry.
have time for just a couple more questions. So,
Okay, we have 4 more hands. We have Rebecca again. Is that?
yeah, can we, since Rebecca's already had a chance to speak, can we go to folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet?
Okay. How about Carly Padilla? And Carly, you'll need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you all. Just as my dogs are starting to going crazy. I really appreciate you all putting on this program today. I'm an education specialist here in San Diego County and deal a lot with the public and these coyote issues. My own 3 right here. Just to go off the other question about the trapping, a homeowner doesn't want an animal on their property, coyote specific, no signs of depredation, but they want to put the trap out themselves. Do they have to apply for a license, or can they just set it out on their own? Or do they have to hire the licensed trapper?
You have to be licensed to use a trap.
Gotcha. Perfect. I just want to make sure I have that and that I'm passing that information along correctly. I really appreciate your guys' time today.
And I'm digging in here to the trapping ban. Maybe I could come back to it. That was established in 2020. Doing a little bit of research here.
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
On the trapping ban that was established in 2020. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you said something else after. Okay.
No, maybe I'll come back to that. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Question, please. Thanks.
All right. And then the other person who hasn't had a chance to speak yet is Cindy Bruns.
Yes, Cindy, you will need to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yes, a coyote attacked one of my pets, and I want to know how I would get the coyote to release my animal.
Oh, I think right now we're talking about jurisdictional issues, and I don't know that we have an expert on the panel right now about coyote behavior. That might have been something that Quinn or Dr. Quinn or Dr. Heron could have answered. I don't know, Vicki, if you have any suggestions.
I was about to say, Cindy, so it depends. So just to be fully transparent, it depends on the size of the coyote and the size of the pet and the location of the bite. So, if it's, well, we won't get into specific details, but the scenarios might play out differently. So I would strongly recommend you can outreach myself afterwards, and my team, including Alex, we're happy to help answer that or help, further dig into that. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I'm going to call on Katie Smith next.
Okay.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you everyone for speaking today. I think it's worth mentioning, even though a lot of the panelists touch on this, that having coyotes in your neighborhood is not inherently a problem. And coyotes are found in most major US cities as their natural habitats continue to shrink and our human populations are increasing. And that they're amazing natural pest control. Rodents are a main staple of their diet. And you can eliminate potential food sources and encourage your neighbors to do the same to safely coexist with coyotes. They're actually rather small and not very intimidating, and most of them will quickly run away when you clap and yell. So I think that's worth repeating based on a lot of the questions and comments that are being asked. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And also just for those, because we do have some more questions about, animal keeps coming back, it won't leave us alone. It hasn't actually bitten us yet, but it keeps coming at us. If you're encountering that kind of an aggressive situation where the animal continues to come at you and try to get at you, I think the recommendation earlier was to call 911. Okay, we're down to our last few minutes, so hopefully if Rebecca and Randy have really quick questions or comments.
Okay, Rebecca, you're being allowed to speak.
Okay, really appreciate that. Thanks. This goes to Chris and Scott. I just wanted to get clarification because we seem to go around in a circle. And if the only trapping is now in California is now depredation, it's no longer recreational, then the depredation by definition, depredation would be the animal would have had to have been a problem animal doing something or threatening to do something. How is it then a town, for example, hate to bring it up, Torrance, how does it comply? How does across the board blanket seasonal month after month, year after year, trapping of coyotes, how does that conform to what you're saying?
So I might get a little help on this one because I don't know the specifics of what's going on in Torrance, so I don't want to comment on.
Having a hard time hearing you, Scott.
Oh, okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sometimes my voice gets a little loud.
You tend to drop off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Computer. So I can't really comment. I'll talk a little louder then. I can't really comment, Rebecca, on what's going on in Torrance myself because I don't actually know. So I don't want to speak to that. But I don't really have anything to add to what we discussed earlier. You have to have a trapping license to use a trap. You have to have the permission of all of the property owners or tenants of property, the consent of them within 150 yards of where you use that trap. You can't trap fur-bearing animals for the purposes of commerce and fur. So all auspices of trapping would really fall under depredation.
Yes, Scott.
But you don't require a depredation permit for taking coyotes like you do for some other animals.
Can I just jump in for a second? I don't think
so Rebecca,
you don't have to have a license to trap.
Right, Rebecca, we are running out of time. We're down to our last few minutes. You have a good, close working relationship with the department. I know you do. You've worked with us as well. I'd really suggest, because your questions are pretty specific about some specific situations and a specific agency and what it's allowed to do or not. I'd really encourage that we have an offline conversation about that specific agency. And that way we're not holding up 100 and some odd people for that specific question.
Yeah, it keeps going back to what Chris keeps saying. It's really situational. So we'd be happy to follow.
So let's have that conversation. Thank you, Rebecca.
Our last two, and I think,
our last one.
Randy.
Yeah,
Randy.
This will be our last one.
You can speak now. Thanks.
Okay, I'll make this brief. I just wanted to reach out to Ms. Alvarez, who's out in the Glendora area, and let her know that she could reach out to projectcoyote.org regarding the sick and mangy coyote, because we work with wildlife rehabilitators, and most likely it is caused by rodenticides in the area. And these licensed rehabilitators, they're volunteers, and they will go out to that area to treat the coyote, which the coyote really deserves to be treated, not removed, just treated and rehabilitated and sent on his way. And then he might not be hanging around because then he can hunt for his own food. Thanks so much for the presentation today. It's been excellent.
Thank you for that, Randy. And thank you to everyone for their questions and the Q&A, and to staff and presenters. This has been really, really, I mean, I'm always learning new things, and then today is no different. So a couple of things I want to reiterate before we go into our closing comments from our panelists and participants here. Just want to reaffirm that this was recorded. It is going to be available. We will do the same in May with that workshop. And also to highlight, there were a number of questions in the Q&A that didn't get answered today or that were only lightly touched upon. And that is because we do anticipate a lot of those are going to get answered or will be discussed in greater detail at the May workshop. So those are things about like using the Keep Me Wild campaign as a management tool, use of lethal control by licensed trappers. When is that appropriate in your management plan? Coyote deterrent vests and other what are the various types of deterrents that can be used? How to manage coexistence with wildlife when we have an expanding human population into the wildland areas, and working with neighbors and communities to make the urban environment less attractive to coyotes, those sorts of things. So those are the kinds of things we'll be talking about, and then specifically about developing management plans with local governments at the next workshop. So really appreciate all that. I do know that Vicki was going to provide us with a little summary about what we heard today and what kind of progress we made before we have closing comments from our panelists here.
Whoops, I was on mute. I apologize. Okay, so first we wanted to thank you for participating in today's workshop. It truly is a privilege to serve you, the diverse public, as we're discussing this important topic. And we're really striving to create an inclusive platform for engagement, outreach, education, and to provide technical assistance. The progress that we've made and what we heard today, this just re-emphasizes our commitment to helping address human-wildlife conflicts, public safety, and reported depredation issues. There are diverse views, values, and perspectives regarding urban wildlife, specifically coyotes. To that end, we do recognize the intrinsic value and ecosystem benefits provided by these native predators. And, conflict resolution, it's complex. It requires an adaptive, integrated approach. It also requires engagement and cooperation from community leaders and private citizens throughout the state. So on the community level, that's really where we're going to be able to dial in and help address these issues. It's important to renote that today wasn't about any one event or response to any particular coyote issue. It's really an opportunity to elicit a broader discussion about coyotes in the urban environment. So today we laid the groundwork by presenting a scientific and jurisdictional framework to support open and respectful discussion about human-coyote interactions, unique community needs, and adaptive coyote management strategies, or at least to develop a deeper understanding that there are multiple components to that, and it truly does have to be adaptive. Each community, each county is unique, and there are certain authorities within which each management plan should be developed and can be implemented. To that end, again, we wanted to increase awareness of authorities pursuant to the Fish and Game Commission, Fish and Game Code, and our California Code of Regulations, and then increased awareness of the rules that are specific to city versus county versus state entities. There's just so much that's happening and so much opportunity that's presented that we have at this moment in time to help transform that conflict landscape. And we're truly committed to that. So this was just the first step of many to explore and vet potential solutions. To note that this workshop is the first of 2, potentially 3 workshops to address coyote conflicts in the urban environment. Please join us for the second workshop, which is expected to focus more on educational campaigns and local and regional coyote management plans. And we really do hope to have the participation from local leaders and members of municipal and county governments to learn how to formulate and implement an effective plan. We're looking right now at mid to late May for that second workshop, and to receive updates, please sign up for our Wildlife Resources Committee listserv on the Commission website at fgc.ca.gov. Again, we're truly grateful for your interest, engagement, and participation. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you for that, Vicki. And then turning to Commissioner Sklar and to Deputy Director Stafford Lair, if you have any closing comments that you would like to make.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Melissa. Really appreciate it. I just want to say what an incredible workshop it was. So much good information, so many great questions. I hope the public who was on are satisfied that with that too, knowing that none of us are satisfied with this as an end process. You know that this is an ongoing process, and really looking forward to the next steps we're going to be taking at the May meeting. So I just want to thank the staff from both the commission and the department again for the incredible hard work that went into this, and really look forward to the process ongoing. Thank you.
Great. Stafford?
I just want to echo what Commissioner Sklar said. This is about providing information, education for both department and commission staff and the public. Complex issues, and they are not solved overnight. So look forward to the next workshop, and my sincere appreciation to all the commission staff, Melissa, Ari, and others, and to the department staff that participated. Thank you. Well done. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and a huge thanks also to our presenters who gave up their time today and helped us prepare for today's workshop. And we really appreciate the back and forth and the dialogue with folks who either through the Q&A and or through the public comments. This is an ongoing conversation, as has been stated, and we're all learning. We're all learning on both sides. So thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to participate and sharing and spreading the word about the May workshop. That's going to be a little more hands-on and a little more in the weeds, so to speak. So we hope many of you will come and join us for that as well. Thank you again. We're actually going to end almost exactly on time. So big thanks to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in May.